OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, you're very welcome along to this morning's OTB AM. It's Ger with you all the way through until 10. We'd love to hear from you, wherever you were watching the weekend sport, whatever it was that you consumed, because there was plenty on to keep you distracted from events. Then get in touch this morning, leave a comment on the YouTube stream. You can always get us 0879 180 180, or of course, you can get us on Twitter at OffTheBallAM. Fresh from Billy Brennan's barn, it's our very own Sheehan. How are you?
Indeed, yeah. There was no dance on there last night. The people of Monaghan were very disappointed with what happened, so the dance was cancelled.
Was it good though? As atmospheric provincial grounds go?
It was. I mean,
provincial is kind of a shitty word for this, isn't it? It's like it's a place.
It's a place, exactly.
Heartland of Ireland.
We don't need to upgrade it. Not everything needs to be viewed in the context of its province or its country. It's just of its place, and that's all it needs to be. It is perfect. It is genuine. It is salt of the earth. That is how I would describe Inniskeen. The most, possibly the most genuine Gaelic Games place in Ireland.
Like yourself, Owen. I thought that, you know.
We reverted to possibly the most genuine moment in the history of our match-going crew yesterday. We neglected to stop on the way up, and we realised that we were all quite hungry once we arrived to McNello's pub in Inniskeen. And you would not be able to find a deli counter anywhere in Inniskeen. We did try, and we arrived at a shop, so in lieu of being able to come away with a few chicken fillet rolls, we brought a sliced pan and ham and cheese into the back of the pub and started making sandwiches for people in the back of the pub. So it was...
sometimes they're even nicer. A little bit of lash some crisps in.
100% even nicer. And not every publican around the country will be that hospitable, but yesterday was one day you could get away with it. So that automatically gives Inniskeen an extra 2 marks out of 10.
Yeah, well, the fact that you won as well, that's more important, right? Ultimately, that decides whether or not you like a place. That was a hellhole where you got beaten by a dodgy refereeing decision by a single point. Like, no, this place completely awful. Whereas if you win, it's like, these people are genuine. They're my people.
100%. Like, it completely affects your perspective on it. And if you go to a place and a team wins, then I mean your day is good. And if you lose, it's like everything here is crap. Those home supporters, awful people. Whereas now, like, Monaghan people are very, very nice. Great bunch of lads.
The goals, I mean, we're going to talk about these in the performance rankings in a moment, but the goals are fairly spectacular. They're going to live in the memory.
I haven't actually seen them back, but definitely there's a big talking point, isn't there, at the moment around goalkeepers and their forays away from goals.
Don't do that now. We're going to do that in the performance rankings, but actually the experience of it, like when the crowd are there and there's like something that is actually kind of very important in the evolution of the game. Is there of excitement?
100%. Like with Sean O'Shea's goal yesterday, there definitely was when he lobs Beggan, and definitely when Beggan gets turned over in the middle of the park before Clifford's second goal, there is a feeling of it's almost like a more guttural feeling of, you know, not only scoring a goal but actually turning over the fly goalkeeper who had the cheek to come out of his goals, which kind of adds to the whole thing. That's not necessarily planting my flag in the ground here on my take on whether or not it's the right thing to do coming out of goals, because I actually just don't know anymore, to be honest. But I think there's definitely a greater satisfaction, right? I think it goes with everything. If an error, and I put that in inverted commas, if an error is capitalised upon, I think that is one of the ways where a bunch of supporters gets an extra kick from a score, right? I think that definitely adds a layer to it. Am I wrong in saying that, or is that just... Well,
I think it's obviously...
glorifying pain?
Well, we've been bearing witness to what we thought was an evolution in the sport, that, you know, the Wunderkinds who are now Wundermans, yesterday completely derailed. It's like when the story of this Kerry team's 3, 4, 5, 7 in a row comes to be written, there'll be moments along the way, staging posts. There'll be the All-Ireland final where they could have won but didn't. There'll be the managerial renting, and there'll be like the full stop they put to an entire movement of Gaelic football blithely on an afternoon where the conditions weren't great, but they were like, look at all this nonsense you're all doing. We are the future. We are the past. We are the present. We are the future. That's what's going to happen when the story comes to be written of David and O'Shea.
Well, I'm glad that it's you that's said it, and that's going to be the take that's going to be clipped once there's another demoralising defeat in an All-Ireland semi-final for Kerry this year. It'll be you that is going to be plastered on the social media account of every Tyrone person in the country, every Monaghan person, or maybe even a Donegal person, or Armagh, as it's like an all-Ulster semi-final lineup this year, as they've kind of like sleepwalked their way through this league because they know that there are bigger challenges coming. They all know that they're going to be in the Tailteann, or not in the Tailteann Cup, regardless. They're all in Division 1 and they're just waiting, as everybody else, you and I, Kildare, Kerry, Dublin, Mayo, are all just thinking to themselves, this is where it all matters. But no, the Ulster teams know better. They know that there are bigger days coming.
We are fodder for the North. It is 7:35 this morning on OTB AM. We'd love to hear from you. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. The performance rankings are coming your way in just a moment. We've got Mark Lawrenson at 8:10. Sports pages. We'll talk about the close but no cigar for Shane Lowry overnight. Shot back, so really great form for him at an important time of the year. You want to be getting good with the build-up to the Masters weeks away. Alan Quinlan's going to talk to us about the most ridiculous sports rule ever. A double sending off for the same incident is ludicrous, and whatever idiot came up with it should be fired. Anthony Moyles at 9:10. We've kind of banned talking about Meath because you can get all your Meath content on the football pod with Tommy. But actually, there's a prospect they might be in the Tottenham Cup this year. And, you know, there's no schadenfreude on our part at all. We're definitely not enjoying that. And then that's Moisey at 9:10. Malcolm O'Kelly reflecting on the win as well at 9:30 this morning. At 7:36, though, it is time for us to bring you the Gillette Lab performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Gillette Labs performance rankings for an effortless finish to your day. It's time for us to get into this, Owen. We do this every week. We have red for bad. We have amber for we're not quite sure whether or not your performance is good or bad. The jury is out. And then we have green for go.
Indeed we do, and it was, as you say, a pretty chaotic weekend, and there was a lot of green, a lot of red, and a bit of amber as well. We're going to start in the red as ever this morning, and as you can see, Chelsea and rugby rules are the things that are coming under fire from us here this morning. Chelsea first off. A nightmare weekend, I think it's fair to say, if you're a Chelsea supporter, and it doesn't even come down to the fact that they lost the cup final yesterday, where their goalkeeper gets substituted off and then the keeper that they bring on ends up skying the ball a million yards above the crossbar. Like, that is very much, I would think anyway, the second worst thing about the weekend from a Chelsea standpoint. I think that the way in which Chelsea have, I guess, conducted themselves in the face of what's going on in Ukraine at the moment was pretty disgraceful, and the way in which they're going to try and protect Roman Abramovich in the way they've already tried to protect him has left a lot to be desired, I think it's fair to say. So for anybody who hasn't seen this over the course of the weekend, there was a 110-word statement that came out from Abramovich at the start of the weekend, which didn't mention Russia or Ukraine. This was Saturday night. This was after today's Premier League. I think maybe midway through match of the day kind of comes out. Met with heavy criticism, as you can imagine, this statement. And then Chelsea kind of come out and they realise that they haven't actually condemned what's going on. They released another short statement 14 hours later on Sunday morning, saying the situation in Ukraine is horrific and devastating. Chelsea's thoughts are with everyone in Ukraine. Everyone at the club is praying for peace. The original statement had said that the stewardship, which is an interesting word, of Chelsea FC will be handed over to the trustees of the charitable trust, and these trustees had only learned of the plan to hand him stewardship of the club on Saturday. And this is the likes of Bruce Buck, Emma Hayes, Seb Coe is on this committee of people. And I guess this has been just a really shoddy attempt to try and divert the attention away from their owner, who is still the owner of Chelsea FC. Let's not forget. There has been some suggestion that there will be sanctions that would dissuade him from ever owning the club again, but that very much remains to be seen. Then yesterday with Chelsea, you have a situation where Thomas Tuchel decides that Edouard Mendy, despite being one of the better goalkeepers in the world, is not going to be his goalkeeper for the penalty shootouts. In fairness, Kepa is known for being decent in penalty shootouts, I guess, or being decent on the goalkeeping side of saving penalties. And he decides to bring him in. He says, target me, not Kepa when it comes to your criticism of the game, and that's where he left that. But all in all, a really, really bad weekend for Chelsea and for their supporters.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to care too much about the Carabao Cup when all the rest of the stuff is going on, and definitely there's like a bit where you're sitting on the couch going, am I going to flick over to the real news, or am I just going to sit and watch this for my enjoyment and escapism? And I think that's going to be how a lot of us are watching our sport for the next while, because the imagery coming through, you don't have to dig too deep to get first-hand eyewitness accounts of what's happening in Ukraine from people on the ground, and it's grim. It's really, really grim, and it's kind of terrifying if you start to think about how this escalates or how it de-escalates. In the meantime, it looks like a very calculated and cynical move by Abramovich and Chelsea to pretend that he isn't actually the beneficial owner. So, we'll put the stewardship of the club into the hands of the trustees of the charitable trust. It means nothing. It actually just means nothing. Chelsea is still beneficially owned by the same person who is Roman Abramovich, and let's not pretend that somebody who owns an organisation like that is not the single most important thing. You know, in American sports, when you win the Super Bowl, they give the trophy to the owner. That's really what they should do in.
They're straight up about it.
Exactly. In football, it's the same thing. Like now, sometimes Abramovich and his relationship with the UK and his ability to get visas has been tricky. So there would have been somebody designated to be in his loco parentis, and that would have been difficult, but it would have been revealing. It's like that fit and proper persons test that the Premier League have allegedly been carrying out on their owners over years and years and years. It's nonsense, right? It is nonsense. And when stuff like this happens, it does throw into sharp relief who owns football, really. Like, football is supposed to be a community representation. It's supposed to be the best of a certain area versus the best of other certain areas. And then that completely fell away over the last 25 years because there's so much money in the game. And when Abramovich pretends that he is somehow responding to the situation in Ukraine with this, while not actually coming out and criticising what happened, like, it's interesting, his daughter did come out and criticise what's happened, but he has yet to issue any statement on the illegal occupation and the invasion by Russia of Ukraine. And there's been no criticism of him from the Tories who run England. And, you know, the money train from Russia to the Conservative Party is really strong, and it's going to become very clear that it's very difficult for English political society, particularly the Tories, to separate themselves from the what was the phrase that was used, the sewers of Russian money that run under London. And Chelsea was one of the baubles on the tree that was the biggest and easiest to watch. And it's like, well, this guy owns Chelsea. Don't let him pretend he doesn't own Chelsea or isn't in charge of Chelsea. And if there are sanctions against Russian business owners and their assets, that has to include Chelsea. He could sell Chelsea, he could divest himself of that, and let's see what happens in that instance. So it's going to be pretty tricky for everybody at the club over the next while to pretend that what's going on by Russia invading Ukraine shouldn't have an impact. It should have an impact, and you know, the football, I think, is going to become secondary in many aspects.
100%. And then there's also like the non-Chelsea aspect of this on football over the last couple of days, and FIFA essentially refusing to suspend Russia from international football has been a very interesting story. So for anybody who missed this, you've got Poland, Sweden, Czech Republic. They're the three teams who Russia may have to go via in order to qualify for Qatar this year. So they've all said that they're going to refuse to play Russia. These games are due to take place in March, and FIFA now wants the Football Union of Russia to be the team that these outfits are going to go up against. You know, no anthem, no fans, so therefore it's not Russia and a different name. I don't know how FIFA are going to try and sort this out, because you've had Poland, Sweden, Czech Republic doubling down on their statement that they're not going to play the Football Union of Russia. So FIFA will either need to give Russia a free passage to the World Cup or review its decision to let them compete. Surely, we never know with FIFA. We never know with FIFA, but surely one of those two options is the more obvious path here.
FIFA did give a World Cup to Vladimir Putin, and FIFA did say that football was fixing the The world's ill. So was football wrong about that? It appears that actually they would have, in retrospect, it'll come to see that this emboldened Putin.
Yeah, like I mean, it does feel that there's like a bit of a line in the sand that's been drawn last week. It should have been drawn way before last week. There's absolutely no question about that. But it does feel it has been drawn here now, and FIFA are now realising what it's like to be stood up to. You've also got the women's team who are due to take part in the European Championships this summer as well. So you'd imagine they're going to meet the same fate that the men's team are. Like, what I think is going to be interesting. So you've got this Football Union of Russia idea pushed out there by FIFA. FIFA, what that says to me, think that the symbolic gesture will actually work here. And I wonder, is this like, did FIFA maybe look at some of the other movements that have seen football and politics mix quite closely over the last little while? And it's not even political whatsoever, but more societal issues. And I wonder, did they look at something like the Black Lives Matter movement and think to themselves, right, football can get away with letting players take the knee, and our day-to-day operations of football is not going to be disrupted any bit by this. You know, we can feel good about ourselves because the players are making their gesture, and we don't need to feel overly uncomfortable by doing anything more. Whereas in this occasion, there are teams who are unwilling to play football matches, and I think that FIFA are now all of a sudden in a situation where they're like, we haven't encountered this before. This is a very, very different scenario, and I guess they are no longer the bully in the room. The tables have turned significantly on them, and how they're going to deal with this is going to be very interesting because, as you said, they've had a very, very cosy relationship with the country over the last little while. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, global events can overtake sporting events really quickly, but it will be very interesting to see if other countries decide to follow the lead of those countries who are saying, no, we're not going to play. And it'd be great if they didn't then play in a behind closed doors or neutral venue or any of that kind of stuff. They just said, no, we're not playing. We're not partaking in this tournament if they're partaking in the tournament. Because if everybody says that, then FIFA end up having to do the right thing, which is kick them out. So we'll come back to that. That's Chelsea in the red. Some special mentions coming in for people already. Special mention for Sinead Kavanagh beating Leah McCourt on one leg on Friday night, grinding it out after getting injured early on. Great crowd at the 3 Arena again as well. Katie McCabe should be in green, scored a wonderful volley as Arsenal hammered Liverpool 4-0. It was an absolute thunder bastard, which is doing the rounds on Twitter if you haven't seen it. And then hard luck to Shane Lowry last night, so close, just a shot back. So, I mean, you would put him in the green for the good form, but is he feels in the red this morning, perhaps, having had the opportunity. So if anybody missed this, Berger was 6 shots clear heading into the final round, and it looked like, you know, it's going to be one of those Sunday processions, but then he completely fell apart, and an Austrian who I am unfamiliar with ended up winning it.
Yeah, Sepp Straka. The first Austrian to win on tour in I don't know how long, and he finished 1 stroke clear of Shane Lowry. Straka finished 4 under for his round, Lowry finished 3 under for his round, and there was just this deluge right at the end, which maybe in time Lowry will think, God, I came at just the wrong time. If it had been an hour later, he might have got himself into a tie break here. Maybe not. Maybe Straka was just in an unstoppable place at that point. And Lowry's putt, for example, on the 18th was always going to come up short, but it definitely felt it didn't do him any favours. Even just having to stand there and wait under an umbrella and as play kind of slowed down probably didn't do him any favours at that point. Was full sure he was going to do it last night, but wasn't to be. But Berger, as you say, bit of a meltdown on the final day. Finished 4 over for his round yesterday, so he finished in 4th place. But still, like finishing second at the Honda Classic is not something that Shane Lowry would have sniffed at the start of the year, to be quite honest with you. So it was a good finish from him, and Straka just sensational yesterday. Lowry coming in 2nd place.
Yeah, watch Lowry over the next few weeks. So he's obviously, when he gets in form, he contends, and that's where his wins have tended to come from in the past as well. So the rugby rules run red. You better be very careful here, Owen. The rugby bros are going to be coming for you if you complain about their laws. We've got rugby rules. We're wrong. Yeah. They're not rules. We're idiots. We've erred first already. From the get-go, we are revealing our ignorance because we are but paupers when it comes to understanding of the laws of the game. Oh, and their laws. Alliteration
is more important than laws, I think. You're not a fan of this, I sense, of what happened yesterday. We really did call it a disgrace at the top of the show, so I mean, I'm not exactly sleuthing too hard here.
So, a man gets sent off for a thing that happens, and one incident leads to 2 red cards. Now, it's not a red card because he's not going to get suspended, whoever you take off. So already you're framing this wrong. No. 2 players get sent off for one incident. Like, every sport in the world has gone through a period where they get a bad rule, they introduce the rule, and they change the rules after that because they realise, oh, we're idiots. There's double jeopardy there. We've completely ruined the sport by our idiocy and our arrogance and our stupidity. But in this one, just go and check all the blowhards defending the law because, well, this incident happened with Pat Lam and whoever else. It's like, oh, rugby is infested with cheats is what their argument is, and we need to fix it. It's like, well, or the rules just need to be the already complicated rules need to be a bit more nuanced. If the second incident is a red card, well, then we actually won't apply the double sanction of the two sendings off. It's just. As Shane Horgan said, if you need a matrix to explain the rules, maybe you need to revisit that.
Are you completely not buying the idea that the rule before, like that there was a loophole in the rule and that there would be room for cheating?
The fix of the loophole has created an idiotic situation, which isn't that hard to work out. So let's just run through when you're in the room. It's like, oh, let's just run through what happens there in this scenario. Yeah, so. A hooker gets injured, the next hooker comes on and gets sent off, and one of the first plays afterwards, what happens then? Oh yeah, well, we sub on another front row and then we take off somebody else as well. It's like, okay, so it'll be 13 men. It's a double red card. Yeah, that's exactly, it's a double red card. What? How does that make any sense?
And would you change it to maybe not a double yellow red card, or not a double red card, but maybe, I don't know, an extended sin bin? I think that's what Tony Ward is calling for, an orange card of sorts.
Aren't they trialling the orange card in the Super Rugby or some kind of equivalent to that? The red card, you can go back after 20 minutes. Like, I get the contested scrums and uncontested scrums. There's been various stages where you're thinking, oh, we could go to uncontested scrums here, and that would be good for us. But, like... You shouldn't be allowed to voluntarily go for it. Like, I saw somebody else suggesting that, you could just have a third prop on the bench, break glass in case of emergency, but you can't do that because you'd actually also need extra tight heads. You kind of need a limitless supply of tight heads to be able to go to the uncontested scrums. But the double red card makes no sense. There's nowhere that I've ever seen anybody go, I'm going to send one player off, but 2 players are going to go off for that same incident. The number 8 had to go off. He got sent off effectively because of the high tackle. Like, there's no other way of reading that. As soon as it was a scrum, they had to sub off the number 8, take him off the field by rule, by law.
Yeah, no, I get 100%. But like, I'm also just trying to understand this from the other side of things, where where actual human beings did come up with this law.
They did.
And so I am trying to
the best and brightest minds in world sport have come up with this plan. Do you feel that this is a well-run sport? Do you think that maybe this is in keeping with other aspects of the sport that we're seeing and how well it's run at the moment?
Well, like, I mean, is it
shit show of a calendar that they have? The mix and gathering of rules at different parts of the hemispheres of different rules. The rugby calendar, the tournaments the hotspots that they come up with. The fact that, like, the Southern Hemisphere countries used to just be able to steal players from the islands. Like, oh, we'll give you a scholarship, come over at 12, you're ours now, we own you. Like, it's a nonsensically badly run sport at the administrative level. It's a brilliant sport to watch. It's a great sport to play when it's safe to do so. And notwithstanding that, we still manage to see great games, but it's run by idiots.
But is it just galaxy brain stuff when they get too far ahead of themselves, thinking about what people might do with the rule and what the loophole might be that they expose? Is that
giving them a lot of credit,
rather than just pure idiocy? I'm just trying to think.
Their brains are too big.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, they certainly think their brains are too big.
The brains are and you can see a team trying to cheat whenever the rules allow it. And if you are getting beaten up at the scrum, you will do everything in your power to try and arrest that slide in some way. And there is a pretty obvious rule. If you've got nobody left in the front row to go uncontested,
say the referee,
and that's why the rule exists.
Say the referee had sent Kepa off for time-wasting and gamesmanship in the penalty shootout yesterday, which it's not beyond the bounds of possibility. He could have booked him straight away. He didn't. He let it go on the whole way, and it really annoyed the Liverpool players, and it had zero impact in the end. But say he booked him once and then booked him again. what would have happened? Somebody else would have been nominated to go in, right? Oh, you can't do that in rugby, it's too dangerous. Well, I mean, if the team is deciding that they're going to cheat to the point where, are we saying that there's no other solution other than the 2 red cards? Because I don't believe that.
Yeah, well, that's where...
You're saying, what's your solution to this problem? And I'm like, well, you know, like...
So, like, I mean, I guess we would need to ask somebody who's played there, but I mean, do you just move somebody else in the forward pack into the front row? Is that actually dangerous? I presume that there is a health and safety reason why that isn't, what actually wouldn't be allowed, and that's why we're in the situation.
Well, couldn't you have like a bad prop play? I mean, we've seen props play hooker, we've seen hookers play prop at various stages. We've seen them do it very well. Like the throwing in didn't seem to be an issue. You know, there's definitely a way around it if they want to do it, but you're going to have the blowhards saying, no, our laws are perfect. They're perfect laws.
It's also probably coloured by the fact that the game became just... It ended the game as a contest at that moment. I know it didn't necessarily until the second half, until Italy got properly worn down and until Ireland actually woke up a little bit. But I do think maybe if this was against a stronger opposition, would this be as big a talking point? Maybe it would, it probably would, but like it does feel that it's like...
Oh, it'd be a bigger talking point because it would be a better game that was ruined. Like nothing happened yesterday. Ireland scored 50 points. We always score 50 points at home against them in recent years. Italy were game. They're always game. Their defensive structures looked okay. Their defensive structures always look okay. They had no attacking... Blah, 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 blah. Ireland, that game... European rugby has managed to make Italian rugby so badly funded and run, and they don't care about them to the point where these games there's no jeopardy in them anymore anyway. So, like, but if it had actually been against better opposition, or if it happens to us, where we end up going down to 13 men, and our game gets ruined against England, say next week, you know, say Sheehan gets injured and Herring gets sent off, or Sheehan gets sent off and then Herring gets injured and there's no one left to go and we go to the uncontested scrums and we end up at that stage 13 men. It's the same. The law makes no sense. A double red card for one incident makes no sense. Like, if that's your starting point, the starting point is wrong. And from that, come up with another solution. Whatever those other solutions are, try those out. And try them out in a sevens tournament. You can't try that in a sevens tournament. Try it out in like a pre-season match and go, well, okay, we want you to simulate this and simulate that and simulate this. What's going to happen here? Like, there are ways to do this without it happening in what's supposed to be the best competition in the world.
Like, I mean, I'm trying my best to find the devil's advocate response to that, but it is hard when you do see two people go out for what is essentially the one incident. But maybe moments like Bloodgate changed the entire perception of rule makers in the sport. Maybe they're like, there are just cheats everywhere.
I mean, there are cheats everywhere.
We need to the thing at the top of their mind is how do you combat cheats.
I thought rugby's values are respect. Rugby's values are cheating and gouging, and like that's why it's such a great sport to watch sometimes, is because it's hard to referee and the game gets refereed at the edges. Like, rugby talks a lot of nonsense about itself, and then it peacocks around, particularly the people who run the game, peacock around about their own brilliance and their own genius. They have a great welcome for themselves, as the saying goes, and stuff like that happens and like, oh no, this is perfect, it makes perfect sense. Your idiot brain is too small to understand how this actually makes perfect sense. Okay, great.
I'm not sure I've seen anybody call it perfect. I haven't really been on social media, or I didn't actually see much of the post-match analysis yesterday, I'm not going to lie. So were people calling it perfect?
There are rugby bros out there who are defending it's successfully achieving what it's supposed to be achieving.
Okay, well, I don't think anybody... I don't think it's perfect.
I love this variation of success. Right, the Gillette Labs performance rankings for an effortless finish to your day.
In the amber, we are putting Tottenham Hotspur, who, let's face it, they probably should be in the green after their performance on Saturday, because all 4 goals were brilliant. You have Heung-min Son and Harry Kane combine for a new record of 37 goal combinations in the Premier League. They move a further goal clear of Lampard and Drogba and Henry and Pires, and time will judge them very well as a pair in the Premier League. But I just can't get past, Antonio Conte and his comments last week, especially when he is as glowing as he is about his project at Tottenham in the aftermath of their win against Leeds on Saturday. Like, there has to be like a 5-step plan to get your way out of the sulk that he was in last week, right? Like, you can't just go from being like, I'm a terrible manager, maybe I'm crap at this, to everything is fine and everything's perfect in the space of like 4 or 5 days. But that's exactly what happened here. So for people who didn't see his post-match comments, like, he went from potentially not being good enough to being like, for the first time I've seen my mark about this system. To create with the wing back and the other wing back, which is Sessegnon, and Matt Doherty, who scored, this is a mark of my system, my formation. This is the first time it means the work is starting to work. It was a good performance for us in a difficult stadium, etc., etc. But it seems that the switch has been flicked in between Burnley and Leeds, and that may be the truth, and maybe Spurs are going to go on and win the rest of their games this season, but it does feel that switches don't just flick like that in football, especially when results have been so mixed. And I'm not sure if I'm entirely buying these Conte comments, despite the fact that I'm a massive Conte fan and think he was the right appointment for Spurs at the time. I'm just not sure if this is the sort of out of the rut immediately, but his comments seem to be suggesting that.
I think it was, maybe I'm doing somebody else a disservice, but I think it was David Connolly on Friday morning on the football kickoff who actually was saying everybody needs to cool the jets in the Burnley performance. Burnley, like, if you look at their results against the top teams, they've drawn with almost all of them. Liverpool scraped a 1-0 win, and everybody else has really struggled against them. So don't over-analyse / overreact to Spurs' Burnley performance. Spurs could be going really well or really badly, and that performance and the result, that might have been fairly similar. The thing to do was to look back at how well they played against Manchester City and go, well, actually, there's a template there. I think he was right. I think he was proven right at the weekend. I think that it's possible that the switch didn't get flipped this week. The switch got flipped a couple of weeks ago.
Maybe.
He overreacted to the Burnley performance, knowing that it was another opportunity for him to stick it to the board, like seize popularity with the fans, and make sure that when the argument is being had in the summer, he's got that one circled and goes, afterwards we did great stuff, but that's still possible. We could still get beaten by a team who are battling relegation because I don't have X, Y and Z. It does look like their players they signed, the two players who weren't enough. They've settled into the team
Kulusevski in particular
pretty quickly. Wouldn't it be amazing if this was to be a late stage flowering of Matt Doherty as well? It's not beyond the bounds of possibility that he can turn Matt Doherty into, he's got some track record of good right wing backs appearing, everybody having written off and then going, you could be in the team of the year. So look, I really hope. Doherty's finish was sublime.
Yeah.
I didn't see any more of the game beyond the goals, so I don't know how well he played after that, but if he's getting name checked in the aftermath of it and things have turned around and the atmosphere is good, you'd expect him to get picked next week.
You would absolutely, especially if this is now the system working, and we said that at the start that this system may actually play into Matt Doherty's strengths, and it's been a few months at this point, and maybe we jumped to conclusions a little bit too quickly about whether or not it was going to work for Doherty. Maybe it just does take time, and maybe Conte is finally starting to see the system work. It's going to be, the next two fixtures are going to be very interesting when he goes up against Everton and goes up against Manchester United. The next two Premier League fixtures, I should say, because they've got Borough in the Cup this week. But that Manchester United game in particular is going to be a very curious staging post for this team, especially given the context of Manchester United reportedly having been interested in Conte in the past. And if you had to make your mind up maybe before Saturday on who was doing the better job so far, Ranić or Conte, or who was having the better time of it, it might have been hard to decide. Now Saturday probably tilts it back in Conte's favour a little bit, and as we said multiple times in the show before, the top four race is absolutely fascinating. There are 5 points between them at the moment, and Spurs have 2 games in hand, so they're going at around the same rate of knots at the moment in the Premier League in that race for the top 4. So it's going to be brilliant over the course of the next little while. But whether or not I'm just throwing my lot in with Spurs right now and saying that it's all sunshine and rainbows, I'm not convinced. But the thing is, you're not going to back against Conte as opposed to some of the other managers around him in that table at the moment.
Well, certainly he's look, we'll see. It could be a false dawn. I don't know. I do feel like there's I'd be amazed if he was to walk away, given that Spurs could easily be a top 4 team with the stadium and with the money and with the whole notion that they don't spend money isn't actually correct over the last number of years. It's just that they've invested horribly. So, okay, let's move on. 2
fairy tales in the green this week. First is a boy from Cork who kicks the winning penalty as a goalkeeper in a cup final yesterday for Liverpool. Caoimhín Kelleher, of course, a brilliant day for him. And possibly an even greater fairy tale story is that a Leinster team has won a game against the Giants of Dublin, which is the greatest fairy tale here.
Well, I just really wish that maybe, we'd sent the team out in a more aggressive fashion in last year's championship to see when we put the white flag up in the first few minutes in Leinster last year. Maybe that was an opportunity missed in retrospect. Maybe Jack O'Connor wasn't ambitious enough for this Kildare crew. Just felt we needed to get that point raised today as a reminder of where we've come from. I think Kildare are probably a little bit ahead of schedule at the moment. Maybe that's to do with the Dubs not being particularly good at the moment.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Is it to do with the Dubs not being particularly good, or is it to do with the fact that Kildare are actually in a really good place? Which is a more important factor in that win yesterday?
I think every match has its context. I don't think the Dubs are great at the moment. I think they're working through a lot. They're definitely trying out a bunch of new players and new combinations and a new style of play. And Desi Farrell's talking about that in the papers today. But equally, it's clear that Kildare have a sense of identity, and they too are trying out players, and they too are trying to be a bit different. For the first time in a long time, they've got a bit of strength and depth, and they've got an inside forward line that's dangerous, and that is going to cause almost any team problems. They've got a reliable free taker, and they've got a style of play and the patterns of play, and they've got conditioning which allowed them to stand up to Dublin yesterday in a way that we haven't really seen for a long time. They were certainly winning the collisions, but again, it's not the championship, it's February, and while it's a good sign, it's not the end of the road. I
100%. But there's also a bit of celebration policing going on around Kildare yesterday, which is just I just find it completely off the mark. I find that the context of this win yesterday is actually significant, because there is somebody on this show who likes to say don't give a sucker an even break, and there is a truth to that. Can you even call the rest of the people in Leinster suckers over the last little while? I think that might be giving them too much credit. I think the way Dublin have utterly dominated them and demoralised them, and it must have been hell to be a county in Leinster trying to exist as a football.
It was pointless.
Pointless. That's worse. That's worse than everything.
It was pointless.
So it is the league. It is just February. We are almost in March, and it is possibly going to be a situation where Dublin do get further than every other Leinster team in the All-Ireland Championship this year. But it's just that little inkling of hope that has been so absent for so long in Leinster that makes yesterday significant. And I don't know, if I'm a Leinster or if I'm a Kildare fan this morning, I'm pretty happy with how yesterday turned out. And the same goes if you're a Liverpool fan. Obviously, we're going to have Mark Lawrenson with us, who will get stuck in properly into this final. But it's been spoken about a little bit in the aftermath of the game. But how much credit does Caoimhín Kelleher deserve for conceding as many penalties as he does before banging one into the back of the net? Because I know it's not necessarily weighted in the goalkeeper's favour anymore when it comes to these penalty shootouts to actually save them, because penalty taking was so good yesterday. But it kind of reminded me a little bit of the Europa League final last year, where obviously David De Gea in goal, and Unai Emery's Villarreal obviously win that on the day. But it was kind of a sense that once you get down to the goalkeepers, you do get kind of battered down by all the goals you've conceded once you get to player 11.
Maybe.
And that's your confidence gets a bit of a tanking. But with Caoimhín Kelleher yesterday, that was absolutely not the case.
No. He was inspired by the Cork hurlers and their absolute domination of Limerick, who didn't even make your list. Put Gerard Gilroy in red for doubting the Cork hurlers, says Mernon on Instagram. I did doubt the Cork hurlers. It was fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But let's wait. Easter Sunday is the day that we're asking the Limerick hurlers to rise from the dead. I didn't realise that, but that's when their championship clash is going to be, which is not that far away at all. So it's obviously Pancake Tuesday on Tuesday, which means it's 40 days after that, if my ecumenical maths are any good. So we're 42 days away from it. I don't know, maybe that's that. Am I right? Is that still the same?
I didn't know. So it's Pancake Tuesday tomorrow, is it?
Yeah.
Nice one.
Conor O'Donnell in green. Good for Donegal to bounce back after the horror show in Kerry, says Richard. Jonathan Moffat says Shane Lowry should be in green. Pierce O'Connor says Desi Farrell, Chelsea on and off the pitch. We agreed with you on that one. Ranick, rugby rules should always be in the red. I don't know about Ranick. It's not his fault that absolute sitters are being missed by the team. Maybe it is. Maybe it is his fault. I don't know enough about really the the bad luck evening itself out over the course of the season versus good quality coaching. But it seems like they have plans in place. We'll come back to that. Dublin football red, Dublin hurling green. The Dublin hurlers not getting enough love. Like we were last week on the performance rankings, so it was a big test for them. But yeah, absolutely, you go and you back up exactly what we asked you to do. And then the Wexford hurlers, so suddenly we have to reevaluate Galway because Limerick in the league against Cork, really not very good, and they did have Keane Lynch back. So does that take Galway back a bit? But then Wexford keep winning and winning and winning. So Queven Kelleher immense today. Pressure on Bazunu. Asks, hey, Brian Rossiter says Limerick and Orange not the same team without the water breaks. I've been there. This is a great narrative. It is absolutely brilliant, and we will definitely delve into it a lot. Kelleher and Green, says Dave, as well. We've already given our special shout outs a little bit earlier on in the show as well. Every week on the Gillette Lab performance rankings, we're looking for your suggestions. Who should make the green, the orange and the red from the weekend? Get in touch on the stories on the Off the Wall Instagram on Sunday afternoons, or comment live on Monday's OTB AM, and we'll pick out a winner for our Gillette Labs Razor Pack. That is it for the Gillette Lab performance rankings this week.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
Right, we've got Mark Lawrenson standing by. We'll get to him next.
OTB
Look, I've said it all along. Players love the National League because of experiences like this. You have a full house here today. Like I say, I got into Newbridge about an hour and a half before throw, and there was a buzz around the place. Big Dublin contingent behind the goal and on the terraces, and massive atmosphere around. That you don't get it in a lot of the championship games, so that's a big plus for the National League, and not just today in Newbridge. I think you've seen it across all the grounds. Despite horrendous weather, there's big support coming out, and Kildare fancied themselves coming into this game today, and it's been a long time since you could realistically say that coming up against Dublin. So there was an expectation on Kildare today, and they delivered it. Like, they were full value. Dublin were kind of nip and tuck, but Kildare deserved that victory today. And the positives for them, for Glenn Ryan, Anthony Rainbow, Johnny Doyle, Dermot Earley, that's what they're going to bring. They're going to bring energy, they're going to bring enthusiasm to it, and that's a massive win for them. We would not underestimate, not just in terms of staying in Division 1, but going into the Leinster Championship, that Kildare will fancy themselves that they can do something in that championship. And I think the big plus, when Kildare play well, it's usually built around Daniel Flynn and Jimmy Hyland. They're dangerous inside. They're two of the sharpest inside forwards that you're going to get, and when those two guys click, it's a massive plus. And like you said it, Kevin Feely's had terrible run with injuries. He is a brilliant footballer. If they can get that guy, that he can get up to 70 minutes, even the 10-15 minutes he got today, you can see he's getting bangs. You're always worried about him when he goes down, but he's such a brilliant player. If he gets firing and he gets 70 minutes coming into the summer, and the likes of Daniel Flynn and Jimmy Hyland can keep up that scoring rate, there's a lot of positives for Kildare to take.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Lots of drama to look back on.
I think now is the opportunity in Croke Park to show the talent and get talking about the players and their skill set.
Yeah, it was Hollywood script stuff.
The Club Championship Show. Subscribe to the GAA podcast feed on the OTB Sports app now.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
13 minutes past 8 this morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. If you've just joined us, you've missed our performance rankings. You'll get them on our YouTube channel, and you'll also get them on podcast if you subscribe to Highlights or the OTB AM feed, wherever you get your podcasts now. It's time for us to turn to football. Mark Lawrenson is with us. Mark, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, thanks. Got back about midnight last night, so all good.
Very good. So you were in Wembley for the cup final?
Yeah. I tell you what, it was a much better game than I expected. I thought it would be far more tighter, and in all honesty, either team could have won it.
Either team could definitely win it. When the two keepers are left taking penalties, is there anything that we can read into the fact that Queven Kelleher manages to bury his, and Kepa, who hasn't had the best career at Chelsea, blasts his over?
I just think the irony of obviously Kepa being brought in just before the end of the game to save any penalties, and well, basically, probably neither of them were anywhere near saving them. But you know what's really interesting, I think, is that, I think goalkeepers should always take penalties, because if you really analyse it, they kick more dead balls than anybody. And, there's a little bit, but they're taking them. I don't think they've got anything to lose. I mean, the quality of the penalties was outstanding, and we kind of sat there thinking, crikey, is anybody ever even going to miss? I mean, they were nearly all in the side netting, as in, the right side of the side netting. Almost, I think maybe only 2 might have been able to be saved. But, yeah, I mean, Kelleher's done fabulous, and his penalty just showed, well, he's got massive cojones. So, and generally, if you look at the competition and the games that Liverpool played in the competition, he's been one, if not the outstanding player of all the games.
It's really interesting that Klopp decides to stick with him and play. It's obviously an agreement he had, but we know so many managers break those agreements and go, I'm sorry, I need to win the trophy. And Klopp does need to win trophies as well. Like his record in cup finals is not amazing.
No.
And so it would have been easy for him to, look, Queeveen, I'm really sorry. If we win, we'll give you the win bonus. You'll get the performance bonus. Don't worry about it. I've got your back. But actually, to go and follow through, it just speaks to somebody who's actually a good person as well as a good manager.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. I mean, he told him at least a month ago, if not longer, that he was going to play in the final. So, and if you think about it, I mean, he doesn't. When you talk about Manchester United and they said rumours coming out from the dressing room and all that kind of thing, which you always get at all clubs, you don't get any of that at Liverpool. And I think it's because when he leaves players out, he pulls them in and says, right, you're not playing tomorrow, but in 2 games when we got Brighton away, you are definitely going to play. So he's always given the disappointed players something to look forward to. I think Fergie did it at Manchester United coming towards the end of his career, and he'd do exactly the same thing. So he's just an outstanding manager. Obviously, I'm biased, but he's an outstanding manager, and he's also an outstanding bloke as well. You just that comes through when you meet him. It's not. It's just evident. He's like that with everybody in the football club. The manager, the cleaning staff, everybody, and the car park guy. It's just the way he is.
How much does winning a trophy buy you a bit of credit with players like Queeveen Kelleher, who maybe without that would be thinking to himself, do I need to play more football? Does, I guess, winning that trophy yesterday make him think, listen, I'm here next season for sure?
Well, of course he wants to play more football, but then, so say if he went into Klopp and said, can you loan me out? And, arguably he'd possibly go to another Premier League side, if not maybe go to the Championship. But if you really, really think about it, in the small-sided games that they play in training and everything, so he's up against Salah and Mane and, all these players, and surely you must learn nearly every single day from them, and they are world-class talent, and he's not going to go somewhere where he's going to be playing with world-class players if he gets loaned out. So he's still young, obviously, everybody likes him. He knows everybody likes him. He must absolutely love it at the football club as well. But I get the fact that, maybe go in the Championship and get battered with all the crosses and the corners coming in and all that kind of stuff. But I just don't see the manager, unless he got another outstanding number 2, I don't think he'd ever load him out. Why would you? I mean, Adrian, no. So that's where you've got to keep him, I think. Or keep him with the first team.
Absolutely. Well, it 100% makes sense from Liverpool's perspective. Like, I guess my question is he playing enough football to keep him satisfied? And I mean in competitive matches.
We'd have to ask him. I don't. I mean, listen, I would suggest that probably yes, because the evidence is there that when he comes into the team, especially in the Carabao Cup competition, he's been outstanding in every game. And, he saved penalties all the way through. He's been the hero on a few occasions as well. And it's all part of the learning process, isn't it? And the thing is, the manager will manage this situation with him, and I really don't think it's an issue. I don't think we'll hear in another 2 or 3 weeks, well, I played in all those games in the Carabao Cup and I want to go out on loan. I just don't see that happening.
And he could literally have a double in goals as well. Like he's going to start against Norwich in midweek as well, no doubt.
Well, I'll tell you, he'll be coming out in a rash, won't he? 2 consecutive games. Wow.
Yeah, no, things that have gone pretty well for him. Like outside of that, then when you're kind of going through, picking through the wreckage of what was a pretty mental 120 minutes of football, Mark, was it a situation where Liverpool will be counting their blessings, or is it a situation where the Van Dijk offside call was such a grey one that you're thinking they deserve to win this anyway?
Well, I mean, Tottenham will be complaining. Tottenham, what am I on about? Chelsea will be complaining about, the things that went against them in the game. I think Liverpool were quite open actually defensively, which is most unusual for them. But it's a cup final. All you can do is win it. And does it really matter if you win it on penalties? No, absolutely, totally doesn't. But I just love the game. I mean, any one of those two teams could have won it quite easily, and the other one couldn't have complained because there's just lots and lots of chances. And by the way, they were really outstanding chances. They weren't half chances, most of them. So I think all you can do in the final is win. And I think as a manager, you don't worry about the performance. It's just all about the winning, and then you move on, obviously.
Was there much talk around Wembley about the Abramovich statement and the nonsensical, I'm not really the owner anymore, I'm handing it over to my charitable trust who will maybe run this for me until I can just come back and take it over again?
Nah, a little bit, but I think when you talk about it and you realise why he's talking and what he's talking about, and then you realise what's happening in the Ukraine, it's like, really? And it was just a nothing statement. Anyway, so it'll be really interesting to see what goes on at that football club. I know the guy, Bruce Buck. I've been in his company a few times. He's a really nice fella, very, very intelligent. And I would have thought if he's allowed, along with the lady whose name I always forget at Chelsea, that he'll be able to sort it all out. But the Abramovich thing was just a nothing. It was like, really, is that it? So I think it showed him up for what he is, I'm afraid. And the fact that, in his statement, he didn't mention anything about, Putin or what the Russians are doing or anything like that. That tells us everything we need to know.
Do you think football will get stronger with dealing with this? We've seen other sports have been quite strong, and we've seen proper sanctions. Like, is there a possibility that he sells Chelsea or is forced to sell Chelsea?
Yeah, well, I think football will get stronger. I mean, it's like, it's just absolutely crazy when you think about it. And you turn the news on and stuff and see what's happening, and then it goes to the sport, and you kind of go, "Wow, yeah, well, sport, we all love it." And then, but really, should we be loving it at the moment because of what's happening? So it's one of those things. But I do think, and I think generally, a lot of nations now are coming out and saying, want nothing to do with Russia, don't want to ever play them, all those kind of things and stuff like that. So that's a good thing. But if you think about it, it's unbelievable, isn't it? What's happening out there? Yeah,
it really is, and it's kind of terrifying in many respects as well.
It's like what you're actually watching history as it's being made. But the problem is, as you're watching it, people are dying, and kids and everything, and you just think, what the hell? I thought, have we not all gone, what everyone went through, I think, in this country, certainly in the Second World War, and they must think, what on earth is this? In the current climate that we're in, and what we have nowadays, it's just bonkers.
Yeah, the Russian people obviously went through the same in the Second World War, and so there's definitely institutional memory in that race of like how bad this could be and how bad it might get. So against that backdrop, we're all watching the football and trying to get distracted by it, and I guess it's going to become more important to be distracted, but also I can't shake the feeling of being a little bit guilty sitting on the couch watching football and enjoying it while at the same time all this is going on.
All of us. I mean, obviously yesterday I'm at the game and I was like doing some work in one of the hospitality areas and all that, and you wouldn't have known anything about what was happening in the Ukraine in and around the game yesterday. And of course, these people that we were with had paid fortunes to go and watch the game and, have a couple of beers and sit in comfort, relative comfort, all those kind of things. And it was just like, at the time, everybody forgets what was happening in the Ukraine and obviously with Russia, etc. And they all had a good day, but I'm sure, my drive home was about 4 hours, and I was talking to my lad about it and everything, and we were saying it, you know, how bonkers it was, and I said to him was, you know, he was obviously sat away from me in the middle of the Liverpool lot, and I said, I know the answer to this probably. Was anyone ever talking about, you know, the Ukraine? He went, no, Dad, nothing. So it's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be more of a topic as the sanctions begin to kick and as footballers continue to talk about it as well. So they definitely have a role to play in this. Let's talk about some of the actual football on the field then. What's going on with Manchester City? Is it anything other than a couple of hard games? And are we to read anything into the fact that they're not swatting everybody aside the way they were a couple of weeks ago?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Tottenham have always, in the last few seasons, I think Tottenham have done really well against Manchester City, haven't they? They were a bit naive that day, I thought, City, which unusual for them. Obviously, the weekend against Everton, I mean, they got away with one, but, you know, good luck to them. I mean that decision about it wasn't handball is just staggering when you consider that somebody is sat in London watching all the different angles of the picture of the handball and decided, no, get on with it, there's nothing wrong with it. And you think, oh my goodness. And that was probably the worst ever decision VAR have made. I can't think of a worse one. But City were pushing and eventually have got the goal, haven't they? Look, they're an outstanding side. I don't see them having a blip, but it just shows you what pressure can do. And, you know, as we've said all along this season, and when Liverpool have been chasing them, it's far easier to chase. And to be chased is much more difficult, especially in sport, most definitely, because there is that little sense of looking over your shoulder. And then if one or two of the players are thinking, oh, well, they're going to catch us, we're going to have a wobble and all those kind of things. And I think they're probably playing a little bit like that. And probably the performance at Everton was that, I think, thinking, well, you know, if we lose here today, look where Liverpool will be and all those kind of things. And but they got through it, which is a sign of an outstanding team. And Everton actually played really, really well. I thought they were very, very competitive and had their own chances. But City won, which is for them is massive.
When you talk about that pressure there, Mark, how's that manifesting itself in these Manchester City performances?
Well, I just think because they've been cruising generally throughout the course of the season, they've been cruising because they've been brilliant. And, you know, I don't use that word lightly. They have been brilliant, and the performances and, you know, no number 9 and all those kind of things, etc., all the chances they've made, all the goals that they've scored, all those kind of things. But, you know, they're obviously human, and I think you get one or two people in the team, and generally he doesn't make too many changes, not from his best team anyway, Guardiola, but sometimes, occasionally, one or two things, the pressure gets to them, which is daft when you consider that they're expected to win every game and win it like 3 or 4-0. But all of a sudden, this kind of on the horizon, this team appears, and it appears with the fact that, you know, Liverpool are going so well, scoring so many goals. They've got everybody fit, no long-term injuries. He's basically got 2 players for every position now, Klopp as well. And one or two of the City lads are thinking, well, they might catch us. And once you start to think that way, and you can't be bloody minded enough about it, I think cracks start to appear, and, you know, it becomes different. But I would still back Tottenham. I would still back Man City to win the league.
Like, it's interesting just in terms of how that actually changes Manchester City though over the next little while, because if we read into Saturday a little bit too much or look into that in isolation, it does seem that maybe Manchester City struggles to create the volume of chances that we're used to seeing from Manchester City. Now, I'm not sure if that's down to Everton and a really good setup from them.
I think that's down to Everton.
Right.
That was down to Everton at the weekend, definitely.
Okay, fair enough.
They still had 8 shots on target. It's and on a normal day you'd think they'd probably have scored more. Are Everton showing any signs of life under Lampard?
Yeah. I thought Saturday's performance was really good. I mean, you know, no Calvert-Lewin as well. So I just think what it showed is this fight there, which is a big thing, because if you're down the bottom of the league, if you look at your players and you're thinking one or two don't quite fancy it here, it's, you know, it's muck and nettles in many respects. No, I think the crowd were great. The crowd have been good with Frank Lampard. I think they realised that, you know, give him a chance. You've had obviously all sorts of different managers, all sorts of different changes at the football club, and which have been absolutely mad, and the money that they spent, etc., etc. But I think they'll be okay, to be honest with you. The spirit they've got looks like they've got a really good spirit, which is at the bottom of the league. That's like the very least you should have.
Leeds have sacked Bielsa. Was it inevitable after the run of results, or should they have stuck it and let him see if he could rescue it?
Do you know what? I think obviously they sacked him because of the results, but also I think because he can't change. He's actually, in the last number of games, he's actually, for somebody, the way he's had the team playing, etc. I mean, last year they were outstanding, and the performances and the improvement of the players in the team was outstanding. He's become a bit of a dinosaur. And look, if you can't defend, especially in the Premier League, you're going to struggle. And it's not, you can't defend. It's just a number of goals, and also the way the goals have come in, and a lot of them have been team goals from the opposition, playing from the back, playing through them, and everything. And the team has scored excellent goals, but also very, very simple goals against Leeds. And yes, they're missing players. Yeah, of course they miss Phillips, of course they miss Bamford, but Plan A didn't work, but he's reverted to Plan A, hasn't he? That's basically what he's done. He just doesn't seem to be able to change it. Instead of going, right, you know what, we're gonna play a different way, still with energy, but probably with more defensive organisation, and with an eye at thinking, right, let's be a bit more defensive. But he just didn't do it. And I think that's been his downfall, to be honest with you.
At the same time, how many of those outfield players, with the exception of Rafinha, do you think would get picked up by Premier League teams in the summer if they get relegated?
Yeah, so you're not saying Phillips and Bamford?
Sorry, yes, the fit players, yeah. If we're kind of looking at the players he's had to work with this season, for the majority of this season.
There wouldn't be many, but I don't take Ailey, the right back. I mean, I think he's a really good player and can play centre back as well, but he's not had a good season. And the goalkeepers look what he is, which is a young goalkeeper making mistakes. And I know Cooper's not been playing, and generally looking at Cooper, you think, well, he's half a yard too slow, but he can defend, and if he circled the troops around him, he's a heady kick it centre back. But there would not be many, but they shouldn't be where they are, quite honestly. And I just do think it's just like he's not been working on them in the midweek or before the games, or as in making it difficult for teams to play against them, because they are just as open as a barn door, to be honest with you. You saw Tottenham's goals at the weekend, saw Liverpool's goals in midweek. And that became a bit embarrassing, in all honesty, for Leeds.
Yeah, Villa were doing the same thing against them, and if they hadn't conceded two bad goals against them, it would have been 6 defeats in a row, and it became inevitable in the end. The relegation battle is going to be interesting. They're getting sucked back into it. Everton are right there, Brentford are right there, Newcastle are starting to show a bit of form, Burnley are showing a bit of form. It's about as much as we could have hoped for, really, at that end of the table too, so plenty to get stuck into.
It's going to be good, isn't it? I mean, not for them, but it's like a mini league down at the bottom. But I mean, you've got to credit Newcastle, because they've done excellent, and the players that he's bought so far who are playing regularly, obviously, have got a bit of hunger for the battle, and they understand what's happening. And of course they're getting good money and well paid. Well, good luck to them, because they're performing, and the run's very, very good indeed, isn't it? The transformation of Linton and people like that is just like, wow. But I mean, Norwich are going to go. I think Watford ultimately will go. And as to the other one, I mean, Brentford is sinking like a stone, but I think Ericsson will definitely make a difference to them. I think Leeds will be okay, and Everton will be okay. And I don't, Burnley obviously have just started to turn the corner, but I'm still not sure about Burnley staying up this year. I think this might be the year that they fall into that trap.
All right, Mark, we leave it there for now. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Thank you.
It's Mark Lawrenson giving us some thoughts on a big win for Liverpool in the cup final. Big day for Queevy and Kelleher. Big day for Cork all round.
It's it is a bit of a fairy tale story, isn't it? We're not just looking at this through green tinted glasses, calling it that.
No,
I think there would have been a general appreciation for this regardless.
The subkeeper scores the winning penalty, and does he out psych the king of the psych outs? Like, did you see the look that Van Dijk made a point of looking at Kepa afterwards?
Yeah,
he was. I can't say the word, but with his eyes.
Yeah.
And with a bit of his mouth. You know, they didn't like what Kepa was doing.
No, like Liverpool also knew that there was a big advantage to going first, and they were like, we're going to rub this in at every available opportunity. And if the tables were turned a little bit and Kepa had banged in a penalty and Kelleher all of a sudden had a penalty to take to save Liverpool as opposed to win the thing for them, it might have been a higher pressure scenario, but they knew that they were in the ascendancy once they got the first penalty, and they took huge advantage of it. It just could not have worked out any better, and it's remarkable that a goalkeeper is going to be remembered for a cup final for doing anything but what goalkeepers used to do, which was save shots.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of goals scored. They were just all offside, or were they? OTB AM brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, at your best face forward with our new and improved razors. It's 8:35 this morning. We need to bring you the newspapers. We can start with OTBSports.com. It's Jimmy Carragher talking about Caoimhín Kelleher. Caoimhín Kelleher is a hero. Ireland will have to be super clinical. That's the analysis that you can hear a little bit later on about our game at Twickenham. Manchester United's younger players are letting Cristiano Ronaldo down. That was Keith Tracy's take in commentary yesterday. And inaccurate, Ireland wins sloppy spectacle against 13-man and ultimately 12-man Italy. So the headlines from the newspapers. This is the Telegraph. Russia cast into football wilderness, kind of, in that FIFA hasn't officially said anything other than you can probably still play all your games and we'll try and make everybody play against you. Back page of the London Times. FIFA refuses to expel Russia, which I think is a more accurate take on it. Leeds close in on an American. The American Jesse Marsh is in talks to become the new Leeds United head coach after the club sacked Marcelo Bielsa. Of course, the 49ers owners are big shareholders in Leeds, so it'll be interesting to see if they're starting to exert any influence. And Jones judges at the World Cup. Eddie Jones has his eyes on the prize, which is the World Cup, not the Six Nations. Carabao Cup final. This is the Guardian. Reds delight Liverpool win Carabao Cup after epic shootout, and Marsh to take the reins at Leeds after Bielsa sacking. I was disappointed Bielsa was sacked. It was
it's, and I'm sure Leeds fans are devastated as well, because it's almost exactly what Mark Lawrenson was criticising him for there. Is the exact thing that made us all love him, was that he was beautifully stubborn and he was so set in his ways, and he was married to playing this great style of football that, yes, it led to them getting hammered quite a bit, but I'm not necessarily sure if kind of a more rigid style of play would have necessarily stood them in any better stead, to be honest. They were excellent last season. Certainly two of the most important players have been injured for the entire year, and I'm not convinced that team outside of Rafinha, as I said earlier on, is any good, and I'm not sure many of them outside of Rafinha would get picked up by a Premier League club if they go down this year.
We'll see, perhaps, although I mean, is it possible they both go down? It is really at this stage, isn't it? I think that them and Brentford could both go down.
Oh, you think?
Yeah. The best number 2 goalie in the world, Klopp hails Caoimhín Kelleher after dramatic shootout victory. I did that terrible thing of looking up Spot Track. I don't know how accurate their details are on contracts, but Kepa signed a deal which is 8 million a year for 7 years, 56 million when he signed for Chelsea. Spot Track have it that Kelleher gets 350 grand a year, 1.5 million over 5 years. This seems unfair.
It seems unfair. It does, yeah. It's obviously not a bad wedge to be getting, and is there a trophy bonuses?
Well, there may well be a trophy bonus. That might be that could have been worth £1 million. You don't know.
Yeah.
That's the type of thing that they're like, hey, look, we'll play you here, and if we win that, we'll give you because that's not. That's the basic. You would hope that there's incentives, and I presume every time he plays, he gets more money as well. But
clean sheet bonus. Thank you, VAR.
Potentially
clean sheet yesterday.
You would definitely hope that there is an opportunity for him, because it's just like what Dean Henderson earns in 3 weeks. Is he?
Probably
the same?
Probably.
Roughly.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
No.
I mean, come on, Liverpool.
But that could be that could
right
be
by the boy.
The real story here about whether or not even Kelleher will stay or go is that, as opposed to how many games he's playing.
Yeah, well, so the new deal only got signed late last year, I think. Anyway, so Dubs being left behind. Look at this, it's good, isn't it? It's a good picture in the front of the. I mean, we're not going to rub this in too much, but we're going to enjoy it a little bit, right?
No, I mean, this is your day. This is not my day. This is.
I mean, the rest of the country is going to enjoy it, though, right? A little bit. We're free from the tyranny of the Dublin footballers.
Yeah, like I definitely think that there is also. I think that the tyrannical nature has definitely existed now in a way where people are like they'll come back eventually and they could still win the All Ireland this year. I think that there's still a bit of an after effect going on of.
But is Dean Rock going to miss frees when the game is on in Croker? Because he missed free like towards the end of the game yesterday that would have just put the heebie-jeebies up the Kildare.
Yeah, possibly not. And there are obviously going to be improvements here and there, but like as I say, this is your moment. You should have come in a Kildare jersey today.
No.
Brady's family having their day in the sun.
Postman celebrate delivery of mail? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's true.
Although the mail was like big and boxy and new, and we were unboxing it yesterday. I was like, yes. Lily White's put Blues on drop red alert. It's a lot of games to lose in a row, isn't it?
That's the thing, yeah.
It's a lot of games.
And in a lot of, not different ways, but like different venues, kind of different weaknesses coming up. And the only thing that's been consistent is just the amount of losses.
Jeepers Kepas? Doesn't really work, does it?
Not for me, but I mean, it's all up to you. Maybe there are people out there who look at Kepa and say,
Kepa.
you know what, I'm pronouncing his name
Kepas.
Yeah.
You see, it's you gotta put yourself in the East End white boy voice that does look like they're fed up with football. This is Eamon Sweeney's piece today. It's like they don't care about it anymore. They don't have the bottle for it. We've just got to suck it up, Farrell. It's difficult now when we have the Dublin coach and the Ireland coach. Dublin manager and the Ireland coach having the same surname, because you're like, what? Andy Farrell saying no one's backing us. Oh, it's Desi Farrell. Okay, right. I was like, I mean, the game wasn't up. Like, Heaven for Kel. Are you getting this one?
Yeah, I'm having that one.
You're having it twice.
I'm having it twice. Yeah, I'm okay
Heaven
with that.
for Kel.
Yeah,
Heaven for Kel. It's Heaven for Kel. The Sun going with the indefinite article. Am I right? Oh, I got the wrong papers. I do have the wrong papers. No, yeah, the Star. The headline's so good they wrote it twice. Mm-hmm. When that happens, when the sub-editors of two rival newspapers wake up and they say, what is it like that?
They were thinking to themselves, I should have gone for Jeepers Kepa.
It's like that South Park episode that was obsessed with The Simpsons. The Simpsons did it. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah.
Alive, oh. Dublin defeat breathes life into Leinster. You see what they've done? Leinster is alive. This is what it feels like to be alive. Pointless Dublin are facing the very real possibility of relegation after they crashed to a fourth straight defeat in Division 1. Tailteann Cup for Dublin 2024? Anybody? Anyone having?
Imagine.
Is it possible?
No, it's not. It's not possible.
And there's the high tackle that ruined the game on the front of the Irish Times. Farrell sees positives in facile win. Double red card for this offence. 2 men sent off as a result of this. But the laws are great. We have great laws. Who are you to question our laws, boy? That's the problem with that one, isn't it? Right. 8:42 this morning. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment in the YouTube stream. Is there anybody out there to defend the laws of the game? Rugby, où sont tes valeurs? Where are your values, Rugby? Well, our values are sending 2 people off for one offence. That's what we believe in. Double punishment.
Preventing cheats. That's where the values are, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. You're on board with it. You thought it was a great rule.
I can understand some of the why. Not all of the why, but some of the why.
But understanding some of the why and defending it, it comes from a good place. It's a stupid outcome. It's an idiotic outcome. It makes no sense.
Like 100%. It makes some sense.
It's like over your 3-star Michelin dinner is like, whoa, what are we going to do? Well, we send off 2 people. That's a great idea. Mm-hmm. That's what happens.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, most of those Michelin star dinners don't make sense anyway.
No, they don't.
So I mean, that's the whole point.
We're going to eat the skull of the Italians. What was it? The mouth. It was the impression taken of the chef's mouth that you had to eat out of in that 3-star review that went viral. Well, that's what that's what they were doing. Carl Mullaney is here to inject a bit of sanity into the proceedings this morning. Carl, good morning to you. How are you?
That's not too bad.
We should start with the golf and Shane Lowry, who hasn't got enough love on the show this morning.
Yeah, I guess disappointment in the end for him. Lost by a shot, didn't quite get there. 9 under par he finished. Sepp Straka was the winner on 10 under at the Honda Classic last night. Now, Lowry has been speaking afterwards and he said that it was possibly the worst luck he's had of his career. The heavens just opened as he got to the 18th tee. There was a par 5 that he needed to... Straka made birdie ahead of him, so he needed to birdie to force a playoff. And he didn't manage it. He made 5, Straka made 4, and he won by a shot on 10 under. Lowry played really well, 67, bogey free. He said that he felt like he did everything to win the tournament, but just unfortunate on the last that heavy rain came down when it did, and that impacted him in terms of his tee shot. So, for example, I think Straka hit a 334 off the tee. He had just teed off before the rain came down, and then Lowry hit it off the tee. He only hit a 241, so he couldn't go for the green in 2.
Okay.
So that's what he laid up and wasn't able to make 4. But really good. I mean, the Players' Championship is coming up in mid-March, and then obviously the Masters in April. So a good period ahead, hopefully, for him if he can maintain that form. But second place on his own last night, so reasonable performance all round.
Okay. A good 6 weeks now would really set him up for a brilliant year, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would. I mean, this is the time of year to be coming into form with, as I say, the Players' Championship, I think, is from the 10th to 13th of March, and then the Masters in April, and then obviously you've got your summer tournaments, and he'll probably come back and play a little bit in Europe as well, and the Open Championship obviously is a tournament that's close to his heart now after winning it in 19. So for him, I guess, Seamus Power has probably taken a lot of the limelight from an Irish point of view in the early part of the year, and he'd actually moved ahead of Lowry in the rankings, but I would suspect that Lowry will move up after his finish last night. But look, I mean, we all know that the talent that he has, so hopefully he can, as you say, have a good 6 or 8 weeks, and that'll set him up nicely for the summertime.
All right, what else is going on?
Well, the Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp has been speaking about Caoimhin Kelleher. He says he put in an incredible performance in yesterday's Carabao Cup final. The Republic of Ireland international, of course, scored the winning penalty in their 11-10 shootout win over Chelsea at Wembley. That's after the game finished goalless after normal and extra time. The Chelsea stopper Kepa missing his spot kick in the shootout. West Ham, meanwhile, moved to within 2 points of 4th place Manchester United in the Premier League. Yesterday, they were 1-0 winners over Wolves. Action tonight in the SSE Electricity League Premier Division. Shamrock Rovers against Drogheda United in Tala is at 8 o'clock. Then 4 games from 7:45. Derry City host Sligo Rovers. Derry beat Shamrock Rovers on Friday. UCD take on Damien Duff's Shelbourne. There's a Dublin derby between Bohemians and St. Pat's, and it's Dundalk against Finn Harps. In terms of the Russian situation in sport, FIFA have imposed a partial ban on Russian competing in international football amid the ongoing invasion of Ukraine. They must play their upcoming games on neutral territory under the name of the Football Union of Russia without their flag and national anthem, while the Chelsea Foundation trustees have not yet agreed to take over custody and care of the club as requested by their own Roman Abramovich following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The 6 trustees want more information about whether running the Premier League side would be compatible with UK charity law, and it's understood the Foundation's lawyers are now working to see whether what Abramovich is proposing can actually be put into effect. In terms of the rugby yesterday, of course, mentioned already, Ireland scored 9 tries in their win over Italy yesterday. 13-man Italy, Andy Farrell's side, 57 points to 6 winners at the Aviva Stadium, setting them up nicely for the remainder of the campaign. In Gaelic games, Dublin's search for first win in this year's Allianz Football League continues. They remain rooted to the bottom of the Division 1 table after their 112 to 12 points defeat to Kildare yesterday. Kerry continue their good win over Monaghan, 3-14 to 112, while Mayo finished strongly to beat Armagh by 15 points to 110 at Dr. Hyde Park in Division 1. In hurling, Limerick remain without a win so far in Division 1A. They lost to Cork by 219 to 113 yesterday in a repeat of last year's All-Ireland final. Henry Shefflin's Galway slumped to a first defeat of the campaign. They lost to Wexford by 215 to 15 points, while Clare beat Offaly by 420 to 16 points. And in Division 1B, Waterford beat Antrim by 321 to 222 at Corrigan Park, while Kilkenny were 228 to 17 point winners over Laois. And elsewhere in Gaelic games yesterday in Division 1A of the Little Ladies National Football League, Mayo beat Galway by 6-6 2-8. And a good result for the Irish basketball team last night as well, as they beat Cyprus in their Eurobasket 2025 pre-qualifier. They won by 83 points to 75 after overtime at the National Basketball Arena, and that leaves Ireland third in Group A ahead of matches against Austria and Switzerland in the summertime.
There was a lot of disappointment at the end of the first weekend of the SSE Electricity League of Ireland Premier Division, because so many teams hadn't had games and games have been cancelled, and we kind of were a bit concerned that there would be a massive advantage for those teams who did have games. But the back-to-back fixtures this weekend, tonight's fixtures are set up very nicely after what happened on Friday night, where Rovers got beaten and Shelbourne got off the mark, and it was just like, okay, this is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Great finish up in the Brandywell as well for that match between Shamrock Rovers and Derry City, and huge appetite for the League of Ireland at the moment. It'll be interesting to see what the crowds are like tonight on a Monday night, rather than the last two rounds of fixtures being on weekend nights with Fridays and Saturdays. But yeah, I think there's a huge amount of positivity. Obviously Shelbourne, as you say, getting up and running, and Shamrock Rovers will have to bounce back tonight. St. Pat's were beaten on Friday night as well. That's going to be an interesting game between them and Bulls tonight. And then obviously Dundalk played quite well against Bohemians. I think the league is going to be really, really interesting throughout the course of the season.
So long as Rovers don't run away with it. That's the...
Yeah, I don't think they will, though. I think Derry City have enough in their squad to suggest that they can definitely keep pace, and I think St. Pat's will consider themselves as title contenders as well. Beyond that, Sligo Rovers, Bohemians, I'd say will be content with the European place this year if they can manage it. I think Shelbourne, under Damien Duff, they will challenge definitely for a top half finish. And then obviously you've got Dundalk as well, so there's loads of teams in there. But I suppose it'll be 6 or 8 rounds before we get a full sense, but I sense that Derry City will be up there alongside Shamrock Rovers, I think, come the end of the season.
All right, Carl, good stuff. Thanks a million for that. That's Colin Mullany. You can read more from him on otbsports.com across the day. It's 8:50. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Now, Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, Ger. How are you?
Oh, we're delighted that we get to talk about the laws of the game again and again and again and again and again. Owen's been trying to defend them wholeheartedly here. He's a fully paid up member of the Illicadoos club that's like, no, the laws are perfect. How else are we going to stop cheats from cheating if we don't make laws like this? But maybe when you make a law, you're supposed to think through what the repercussions of it might be.
Yeah, I think when the law changed, it was obviously done to stop teams who were getting dominated in their scrums from cheating and faking injuries and taking off their props, and then their scrum wouldn't be getting pushed backwards, and that they could possibly win the game and take away that advantage from the opposition. So the reason this law change came in, that if you end up with a couple of props going off injured or front row players, and the players that come on, another one goes off, and you have to have uncontested scrums, that if it goes to that situation, that you have to reduce the number of players in the field and take another player off. So it's to stop teams from doing that. Obviously, if it happens in a game, well, because it's an uncontested scrum, you're taking away one of the big strengths of the opposition. If they are dominating you, it tries to change that. These circumstances, the circumstances that happened yesterday, are kind of unprecedented. When you have Lucchesi, the Italian hooker, starting hooker, he goes off with a dislocated elbow. Then Faiva gets sent off. I think a change in the law, or a tweak in the law that's been brought in to stop the cheating, would be to give the discretion to the referee. In other words, these are exceptional circumstances. He's seen a player go off with a dislocated elbow. He's sent off the other player. So can he have discretion there and allow them to not reduce the number of players? People have said that to me yesterday, but then if he does that...
Does he have discretion to allow them to have contested scrums? Is it automatic that you can't have contested scrums?
This is the problem. No, it's not. The law would allow you to have contested scrums. Neymar came on the field yesterday, the sub-Italian prop. Italy would have had to say, I'm happy to play hooker and have contested scrums with their captain Campanaro, and actually argue that point out with the referee and say, no, we're fine, he's fine, and we want to have contested scrums. And I was surprised that, like, they did try and argue that a little bit.
But the captain seemed to be trying that, but it seemed like the referee was saying, no, I can't be any more clear.
that's what I thought, that he was dismissing it. If the law would allow, if Italy wanted to put him in as a hooker and say, we want full contested scrums and normality here, they wouldn't have had to reduce the player. They didn't argue that point strong enough, and that was an issue. Maybe it was down to the language barrier or not being able to translate that question, that point across. But I was surprised that they didn't, because the law does allow you, if you can bring the player on, and it's not about nominating before the game, it's about saying the player who came on himself, I've played hooker before, I can play here, no problem. And that didn't happen, which was a shame, because look, the crowd, the atmosphere, everything just seeped out of the stadium after that, and it was a kind of farcical situation. At one stage, and I think 75 minutes, Bram Stein was sin-binned as well, so they were down to 12 players, which was, it's a shame, really. I think Ireland would have wanted to kind of been, and would have expected to be 30 points up in midway through the second half. That's what they were up. I think it was 36-6 and at one stage, and obviously they were playing with 13 players. So what went wrong for Ireland? Why didn't they score more points? I think mentally they kind of switched off a little bit as well and lost their focus. So it was a kind of a farcical situation. But the law that's there is there for a reason, and this is really important that people understand. The teams have exploited that situation before when their scrum has been under pressure. They're winning in a game and they're trying to, fake injuries to take away dominance from the opposition scrum. If you get to that situation, you've got to take a player off.
That's fine, right? But there should be a different scenario where if you're taking out somebody from the front row because of a red card, the red card then automatically is a double punishment, and that makes no sense in any sport ever to punish two players for the same incident.
The circumstances are different, so
it's not entirely unprecedented. Like you can game this through and go, well, what happens if it's a red card? Well, in that case, actually, that's different. We've enforced, some foul play has occurred, and to send two players off for the same foul play doesn't make any sense. Like that, they haven't cheated in this instance. There's a difference.
Correct. And that's what I was talking about, having discretion, and the referee actually said, and maybe tweaking that law to say that, look, if there is a red card, they haven't taken somebody off, or somebody's not, got an injury there, a legitimate injury, because the first one was a legitimate injury. Lucchese went off with a dislocated elbow, then it's a red card. So maybe that's what needs to happen now, that if there's a red card involved in this, but then, there's a punishment. It's a double punishment. They've already lost the player.
Yeah.
And I think it's harsh. It's
and no one's going to get a red card. No one's going to get a red card on purpose. There's no team's going to go, we're going to get this guy sent off so we can go to uncontested scrums. That doesn't make any sense. That's not how the teams are cheating. It's like they didn't bother thinking this through to the end. Well, what if it's a red card where somebody goes off? It's like, oh, well, look, sure.
Yeah, when the law was brought in, it was down to props getting or hookers getting injured or faking injury. And it going to uncontested scrum. And look, if a team ended up with uncontested scrums, the probability is this doesn't happen till maybe the 60th or 70th minute. Do you know what I mean? If guys are getting injured, that's probably the reality. So if you to play the last 10 or 15 minutes with 14 men, you're not really going to be going crazy over that if the law was adopted in for the reason it's brought in. But because it happened so early yesterday, and because there's the red card, and again, probably debate around the red card a little bit. I'm probably fairly close to zero tolerance on the high hits. But part of me just felt sorry for Faiva yesterday. But your letter to law situation, again, it was a red card. Some argue that maybe it was a little bit harsh. I think if he gave a yellow for that yesterday, it was one of those ones where if the referee gives a yellow, Ireland are not going to be up in arms after the game over it. But it just made it a whole farcical situation. And it was a shame, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. In terms of the injuries, Andrew Porter went off with an ankle injury, and they took him off really quickly because obviously you don't want to take any risk for it. But if he was to be missing if Robbie Henshaw has a HIA. Afterwards they said he looked fine, he'll go through the protocols, but he should be available. Is there anything we learned about selection? Is it automatic Sexton starts now against England? The consensus afterwards seemed to be that Joey Carberry didn't do enough.
Yeah, that's the reality. I think it didn't suit Carberry either, because I think if Ireland were playing against 15, I think they would have played a lot better and they would have been a lot more energetic and a lot more conscious of sending numbers to the breakdown. You saw Ireland had 4 or 5 penalties against them at the breakdown, which was kind of alarming in a sense that a team with 13 players can do that to them. But for me, that says it's a mental thing. It's players who probably didn't feel the panic or the fear or the need to get into the breakdown quicker with players carrying the ball. Lots of players probably standing off, looking for space, hoping to get line breaks, hoping to get the ball in their hands. And that seeped right across the team. So, Carberry, the game just got very, very kind of loose, and Ireland seemed to lose their focus. When Sexton came on, there seemed to be a bit of a change. It was like, this is how we're doing it. This is where we're going to attack. And I'm laying down the law here. And obviously he can do that with authority and experience. Much better.
I accept it. It looks different, but it was against 13 men Italians who were absolutely exhausted after an hour, where you would expect whoever's coming off the bench to have a bit of an impact. So I just want to cool the jets on that. It was one of his all-time great Ireland performances.
I agree with you as well. It was disjointed from all the players, I think, and that was a shame for Carberry as well, because I think the feeling, and a lot of the players said it, they would have probably preferred, and we shouldn't kind of be feeling sorry for the Italians here, I think, but the reality is Ireland probably would have played better if there was more players. That sounds crazy, because if you have a numerical advantage in games, you should be exploiting the opposition and the space more. But you can imagine if you're an Italian player there, Ger, it's pure desperation, and it really kind of, your mind should be focused anyway, but absolutely desperation to hang on and scramble, defend, and just really dig in. And they showed a lot of steel and grit in doing that. And then the flip side of that, Ireland just got a little bit, lost their focus a little bit, lost their shape, and probably expected it to happen a little bit. And that was evident at the breakdown for me, because Ireland shouldn't get turned over 4 or 5 times in the breakdown, even against the top teams in the world. You're always going to get caught a couple of times in a game. Campanaro, the back row, the open side, the captain was brilliant. Lamaro, I should say, was absolutely brilliant in his performances. I don't know why I'm calling him Campanaro. I think it's Lamaro, and I was so impressed with him yesterday. He was an absolutely outstanding player. But it was kind of a frustrating one for Ireland, wasn't it?
Well, what about England then? Excellent in parts, control the game, but not particularly efficient with the control they had. Allowed Wales to get a sniff at the end, even though Wales weren't really in the game at all. So what to make of that performance?
It's difficult, because Wales have improved, obviously, from that first game against Ireland. England were quite blunt and not really sure between their power game and their attack game where they're at, really, with the players Eddie Jones has introduced and the type of game they're trying to play. I think they were fortunate in the end and pretty relieved to be hanging on against Wales, who reacted and were magnificent probably for the last 20, 30 minutes of the game and could have possibly won it. England weren't great, and it's hard to judge it, as I said, because Wales improved a lot, but for the try that England scored, just I think they were fortunate there in that line out. Itoje holds down the lifters, and the ball goes over the back, and they score from that, and that's probably the game really for England. And they kicked a lot. Their attack wasn't fluid like we expected. So I don't know. It's hard to judge them, but on the evidence of what we saw at the weekend and what we've seen so far from England, A very, very risky thing to say. I'd be confident with Ireland going to Twickenham.
Like, this is it's been an interesting couple of years. Like, if we look at, say, England coming to a nice peak for the World Cup, and this kind of expectation that we're going through at the moment, that England are going to be fine next year, and if you're an English rugby supporter, you can expect this 18 months to be a constant upward trajectory. Like, in the aftermath of the game on Saturday, he was talking about the limitless potential of his attack. It's got no ceiling, was his reference to his attack. Like, he referred to his team potentially becoming the greatest team of all time 2 years ago. Like, I mean, Eddie Jones obviously talks quite a big game, as we all know, but it seems that even some of the terms that he's using about this England team are even a bit OTT from Eddie Jones himself. So what's the reasoning behind that, and is there any credence to it at all, do you think?
I don't know. I obviously those comments were made, and you know, people set goals, and sometimes as Irish people were nervous about kind of shooting for the stars and saying it openly. He openly said that yes, they want to be the best team in the world and dominate and be the greatest team ever. They had probably potential to be, and reason to be aiming that high, given where they were, you know, at the World Cup and the performance against New Zealand. And if they won a World Cup, they would have been on the road to do that. There's been a lot of change in the team. The Vunipola brothers gone. Manu Tuolangi was obviously, you know, can be a world-class player when he's fit and available. And the depth chart that England can always kind of produce would enable them to be one of the top teams in the world continuously and be up thereabouts. But I just don't think they know what they're doing at the moment. There's been so many changes in the coaching team, coaches walking out, not wanting to work under Eddie Jones, stuff like that. I'm not sure where they're at. There's some very, very good young players. Stewart at full back is huge potential. He's big, physical, athletic player who's can be brilliant and can really improve. They've had a lot of injuries. I just don't know where England are. It was a terrible, terrible game to watch on Saturday. From particularly that first half, it was blunt, and maybe both teams were cancelling each other out. But I just think England are a team that are not really sure what their best option is at the moment, whether it's power, whether it's attack, and that was pretty evident on Saturday.
What do you think it is? Like, what is the best version of England?
I don't know, Owen, because, you know, the way they would have, when you play England and back to when I was playing, you always fear about the power and the aggression up front and the physicality. And I'm not saying that they're not physical. You know, they are very physical. Genge and Itoje and even Dombrent coming in there, he offers them a lot in attack and defence, and he's a big athletic player. But they're not overly dominant up front against teams at the moment. And then they're lacking a little bit of penetration in that back line. I don't know, have they any sort of X factor? Marcus Smith at out half is very, very talented, but he's a bit like Joey Carberry in a sense that there's still a gap between him and what Owen Farrell has brought to England in the last number of years. Real steel, resolve. And I just watched Wales players continuously running into his channel and in the second half on Saturday and getting 5, 6, 7, 8 yards over the gain line. And when you do that against the opposition, well, then it's very hard to defend infield when you're getting over the gain line so much. One of England's big strengths in the last number of years, and probably continuously, has been stopping people on the gain line, overpowering them, putting pressure to break down, and just, you know, you're struggling to play against the men because you're on the back foot. But they're not really doing that against teams at the moment. So maybe we're being too harsh and too critical that they are in this major transition, that maybe Eddie Jones doesn't mind that they're going through this period. But, you know, an English team at home in Twickenham, you'd think they'd be a little bit more dominant. I don't think they were at major risk of losing the game. They controlled it pretty well, but it was blunt and it was hard to watch at times on Saturday.
Having said all that, and having said you can feel pretty confident about us going to Twickenham, we have not used this as a testing ground for new players or for anything other than trying to win the competition. So if we were to go to Twickenham and lose, it will be fairly devastating to the current...
I don't think it would. I don't think so.
But why not? So, like if we're picking our best team, we're trying to win.
Andy Farrell's probably capped up on 20 players since he's come in. I don't think...
He's not playing a lot of those in this competition. So Larry played yesterday. Larry's not going to start. Keenan's going to start. We know that. Mac Hansen has come in, and that's really the only player who's come in. And maybe Mac Hansen starts, maybe he doesn't. Maybe James Lowe starts instead of him. It's a first choice team that we'll be going to England, where you don't really feel like England have evolved to the point yet. They're in transition. We have to have high standards of ourselves, surely. We have to demand a win from our best team versus their kind of working things out team.
100%, yeah, that's the point. I think you can't, there's no way you can go to Twickenham and experiment, because Ireland need to win this game. They need to try and challenge and win the championship as well, bring it to the last day. The World Cup is the World Cup in 18 months' time. I think you can't just... There may be one or two positions where there's a little bit of a chance taken on certain players, but you can't go to Twickenham and completely experiment. And I think, look, my point about the players he's capped, he's built a lot of depth in this team. Look at the Ireland performance 2 weeks ago in Paris, making some mistakes, getting some kind of things wrong, tactical things, couple of decisions that went against him, particularly around the line-out, and they lost 6-0 against France, who totally overpowered Scotland at the weekend and are setting themselves up nicely, and it's hard to see anyone stopping him. I thought Scotland might have a chance the weekend. We now have to think maybe Cardiff, it might be tricky for them in Cardiff, which it will be, but or England may do us a favour in the end. But Ireland have made under Andy Farrell, he's done really, really well to start getting some depth in there. Obviously, the Carberry situation yesterday, people would have loved that, if he got a lot more game time and played better. The circumstances were crazy. I think he played okay. It wasn't that he had a bad game, but it was just a flat performance, probably from him and his teammates against 13 men. And, there is a fair bit of depth in certain positions. The second row is an area that would probably concern me, and I've said that a few times.
Yeah.
That there is a bit more depth found there, but you can't just invent players. I think where Ireland at the moment are pretty good, and I think they're well capable. If they lose in Twickenham, going back to your point, yeah, well, is it a disaster? I don't think so, because we've seen a lot of new faces in the last 18 months.
All right, we'll leave it there. We'll come back to that. Plenty of time to build up to that one, Alan. Good stuff. Thanks a million. It's Alan Quinlan.
Cheers, thanks, lads.
Giving us his thoughts on what happened yesterday and the rest of the weekend. We'll get to your views in a little while. You can keep the comments coming through on youtube.com/offtheball. We stream live there every morning. And of course, you can also get us on OTB Sports Radio. Here's what's coming up between today and this evening on Sports Radio. OTB Gold at 1 o'clock is Declan Murphy. His book is called Centaur, State of the Union, with Keith Wood. Mount Rushmore, Kilkenny, very controversial. I was away for that one. OTB Gold is Dr. Harry Edwards on O.J. Simpson, a brilliant interview about the O.J. documentary series, which if you haven't seen, you should rectify that as soon as you possibly can. A reminder, OTB AM brought to you by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We've got Anthony Moyles standing by. We're talking Gaelic football next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The Six Nations on OTB.
Can you come on and talk about Ireland's attack shape? It's really exciting. I don't remember ever getting that call 15 years ago.
It's spinning! It's spinning! I've never seen a team like Ireland before.
Excuse me, that's a bit offensive to us because we're Welsh. You could just keep your own opinion to yourself.
The Six Nations on OTB. Don't miss a moment of the action. Subscribe to the OTB Rugby podcast feed now.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, are we back? Are we back in a situation where Gaelic football is the glorious uncertainty and chaos of almost any of the top tier teams believing they can win in All-Ireland? Or is there a new world order being slowly and quietly asserted in the form of Kerry? Anthony Moyles is with us this morning. Anthony, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. This is, I think, maybe one of the few times in our lives where we're both celebrating a victory, a victory Monday.
Yeah. How's it feel, Joe?
Pretty amazing, to be honest. I mean, like,
are you able to glow just like Owen does, or are you gloating, or is it just kind of like quietly confident? Or
no gloating.
Yeah.
No gloating. History teaches you don't get too long to gloat. If this was a win in the summer against the Dubs, then there'd be a little bit of gloating going on for sure. But you don't want to wake them up just in time for them to go, oh, sorry, yeah, okay. You're good again. We better pay attention to you. It's like, it could go either way here. It definitely feels like I don't think the Dubs race is run at all. I think the prognostications are a bit mad. It's still a league game. It's still February. They still have some good players to come back, and they still will have a pattern of play. It's interesting that some players are coming back and starting to play good football again for them in patches and matches. And I'm not saying that's enough, but I ain't writing them off just yet.
But it feels good, though.
Yes.
It feels like you could see it. You could see it with Glenn Ryan and obviously the crowd. But you could see how much it meant to the players and to the management team. Like, it feels good, and they obviously had. I'd say Kildare had put a sense of, right, we want a performance against this, and Ryan spoke about that. But very much, I'd say they said, listen, we're bringing them to Newbridge. We haven't had them here in a long, long time, I'd say they put it on the fixture list and said, this is the one we're really going to try to lay down a marker on. Again, it brings up that whole debate about these bringing teams and bringing Dublin out of Croke Park and the difference it makes. Is it 3-4 points to the home team? It probably is, because that was an unbelievable atmosphere. And Newbridge, as you well know, Newbridge is tight. Especially when you even get away from the stand and you're over the far side. If you're playing that far side as a wing back or a wing forward, you feel the crowd right on top of you. They're right next door to you, and they don't mind letting their feelings not be known, of course. So it's look, it was a great win for them, and you can see the momentum building with Kildare. You could see it last week. I thought they were very unlucky, actually. And you can see it. They've been in the battle every single match. They have been in the battle. Their commitment is immense. They're throwing themselves on balls. There was a couple of incidents yesterday where there was 50-50 challenges, balls on the ground, where Dublin players, one or two of them decided, I'm just going to hold back a little bit here. Didn't show up well at all. And Kildare fellas threw their bodies on the ground, won the ball and won vital turnover. So, they'll be really, really enthusiastic after it. And they're building very, very well.
If you're Desi, are you worried about the fact that the ball is literally inches from going into the back of the net on multiple occasions, and for whatever reason it doesn't make that final bit of the journey? Or are you thinking, that's okay, we're creating loads of goal chances, maybe when Con comes back, maybe when some of the rest of those inside forwards get a little bit sharper, they end up as goals?
I think we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, and I've seen people... I'm a little bit. I'm like you. I think that this, kind of writing them off is way too early. We've been speaking about it, and as I've been saying, they're getting elements of their game sorted, and every week they seem to be just adding an extra bit. And as you say, with players to come back of the caliber that the players who are going to come back, just by them being on the pitch and being able to do what they're able to do, all of a sudden it increases their chances once again. I feel that there's some players, and it's unfortunate, when you get a chance say, there's a couple of players, I won't name them, but a couple of the forwards who've gone in who have had chances now, they just haven't grabbed it. They haven't grabbed it by the scruff of the neck. They haven't taken shots on. They've been dishing passes off to the likes of Kilkenny, dishing passes off to Scully or dishing, Dean Rock or wherever, instead of actually going and taking the chances themselves. And I felt that some of those goal opportunities, not only yesterday, but in previous games, there was a thing of, I have to get it to a certain person, rather than actually, do you know what, I'm going to take the bull by the horns here and I'm going to have a go. And that's what you have to do to break into a team. And that's what you have to do to make sure that you're obviously on a starting 15 coming championship. I would have thought that it was a really good time for some of those younger Dublin lads, or even some lads like Pascal, who've been there for the last number of years, to really set a marker. But there just seems to be a little bit of tentativeness. And if I was Desi, you're probably saying, listen, we're creating them. We seem to have our defence in a decent order. I thought our defence was much better yesterday. They seem to know what they're doing a bit more. There seems to be a bit more structure. And essentially it's the fact that they just can't put the ball in the net and over the bar at the efficient rate that they're used to, Ger, which I think is probably something that they're going to really work on over the next kind of month or 2 months.
All right.
That's like a pretty identifiable thing, right? And that's like not an easy thing to fix, but it's going to be close enough to, I think, that takes Dublin to a level where they're not losing these games and all of a sudden are one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the country again, or is that overstating how dramatic that improvement would be?
Look, there's no doubt about it, Owen. They've come back into the pack, okay? There's no doubt about it. And the pack have been continuing their progression forward. And yes, they've come back. I actually don't think it's going to be a football thing at all. I think they will get the players back, and I think they will start to score. I think it's actually a mental thing. I think when I look across some of the results yesterday, and it's something I've been observing over the last while, the narratives around teams and the narratives that are being put out there in many sports and in many walks of life, it's quite amazing how a narrative can develop around a team. And then it's quite amazing how a narrative can actually be taken away from a team. So, if you look at Dublin, Desi was, I think they missed a trick in the sense of, he should have said this year, we're completely rebuilding. And don't have no expectations of us. This is not a team that will go out and win All Irelands. We're starting right back. That team, that golden generation is now gone. Yes, we have some remnants of it, but essentially this is a new team. And I think if he had set that out early, people would have probably said, well, listen, they are building. We're going to give them the opportunity to do that. But instead, there was this kind of halfway house where people were still expecting, and people were nearly kind of happy enough to see the fact that they were actually falling on their own sword and not winning games and da-da-da. So it's I think the narrative is something that even within the dressing room, and I don't know what goes on within the dressing room, but it's his motivational ability, and it's his ability to get those guys to a point where they actually have got it in the stomach to go and push again next year, or this year, should I say, and go and push again for another Sam Maguire. And those things are very, very, they're hard to gauge, but they're slight little things that happen in matches. As I said, 50-50 balls that you don't go for, decision making, certain things, just the ability to really turn and chase a guy back that you would have done last year or the year before, which you think it's a lost cause, and next thing you end up getting a block on a guy or something like that, and it's a pivotal moment. They're the small little things that you might miss even in watching a game, but they're the things that actually will make or break a team. And Kildare and the other guys have it now when they're coming up against Dublin. And for me, that's the biggest factor that I think he has to get right.
To talk a little bit more about Kildare, the other thing that was noticeable was the conditioning was allowing them to go into collisions. Now, there were still some blind alleys of possession, and listening to Paddy Andrews talk about the club final a couple of weeks ago, where players who aren't, or the system isn't evolved enough, you take an extra pass, you get swallowed up by a defence. Kildare still got caught in possession a few times, particularly in the last 10 minutes of the game when the sphincters were tightening on everybody who was watching it. But their conditioning is at a level now where they're actually able to compete against the strongest Dublin players and not come off significantly worse. Whereas in recent seasons, it felt like Dublin physically were able to dominate teams. They were faster than them. They were stronger than them. They don't seem to have that advantage at the moment.
Yeah, they don't. But again, again, you have to look at the players that are missing, Ger. You throw some of the guys that they haven't got into that pack, who are big physical fellas and fellas who are able to blow through tackles. I think a number of years ago, looking at the Meath situation and the Leinster football situation, I remember just thinking to ourselves, the first thing that has to happen is, it's kind of like an athletics race. You have a guy who's able to run whatever it is in the 100 meters. Well, the first thing you have to do is, if the rest of the pack are chasing them, they have to get to the physical capabilities that they're able to compete, first of all. So they're not breaking down, that they're strong enough, that they're able to do all the things. So when you put one person up against the other person, there is no deficiency in that player or that athlete and this athlete. That's the first thing that has to happen. Then you have to work on, obviously, the skills, and you hope that the skills are improving up to a point where there's no skill deficiency. And then it comes down to, again, the narrative around the team, the motivation, what's happening, who really wants it, who doesn't want it, the psychological aspect of the game. And I think the physical and the skill elements of teams around Dublin and in that chasing pack have now caught up with Dublin. So we spoke a couple of weeks ago about Kerry, and I was mentioning, Clifford and O'Shea. These lads are big men now. They're not boys anymore. They're not like 18, 19-year-olds that the Dublin lads were able to just feck out of the way and throw them out of the way and away with them. These lads are big boys now. They dictate the pace. They dictate what's going to happen. And they nearly dictate the terms of engagement with regard to the football. So not only are you meeting fellas who can play ball and can play it at an unbelievably high level, but you're also meeting fellas who can mix it with you physically. So all of those things have coincided, I suppose, with a situation where, Desi Farrell and his management team are kind of saying, have we got the fellas who can go to the well again? Because it's not the younger guys. It probably should be the younger guys, but unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way. The younger guys are not going to be the guys who really lead. They're going to be the fellas who chip in, and the likes of Gannon, for example, is a great leader. You can see it already, that he's a guy who's taken it on. But some of the other fellas won't. So he needs those fellas like the Howards, like Scullys, like these guys who are still young but who've been around and have a number of All-Irelands in their back pocket. They're the fellas that need to dig deep and need to say, you know what, we're taking this on. We're not going to let this narrative build about us. We're not going to allow this to happen. We're going to come and we're going to actually take this championship by storm. Have they got the capabilities to do it? Yes. Have they got the players to do it? I think they do. But do they have the mental strength to do it? That's the question.
What about Kerry then? Owen was in a scheme to watch the end of the goalkeeping. We talked a little bit about this at the start, but legitimately, Beggan got caught twice.
It's not it's a question about whether it's not about the end of the fly goalkeepers at all. Because I know that there was obviously a pretty positive display of it in the Kildare game, from what I understand yesterday. I didn't see it, but
it's still a few instances where you're like, ooh.
So I guess, Anthony, the discussion is about the risk versus reward thing. For me yesterday, and this is just an isolation of yesterday, where Beggan perhaps either was down to him or down to his teammates, his forays out of goal just weren't beneficial enough to the Monaghan attack. There wasn't enough pace coming off the shoulder. It was basically having 15 men passing relatively laterally without much penetration, rather than having an added man really trying to burst through that defence. So for me, when you leave that risk open at the back, the reward actually just isn't worth it. Whereas what we had in the first game of the league, you'd Beggan actually scoring from play, so that probably is worth it. So what's the balance at the moment in your view, or can he throw a blanket over this at all? Is it dependent entirely on the team you're up against, the goalkeeper at your disposal, and a multitude of other factors?
It's probably a multitude of factors, Owen, but I think there should be some hard and fast rules with it. I think on the kick-out situation, it should be a hard and fast rule of whether you're playing with, the opposition keeper is kicking with the breeze or against the breeze. You want to squeeze up. And I think there's some teams they're just doing it all the time, and they're putting the keeper out there to be a visual impairment. So when the opposition goalkeeper looks up, he sees the other goalkeeper and he says, well, I'm not kicking into that space. And I think there is a little bit of, as you say, just having the keeper out there, just to have him out there, and he's not really doing anything. You could nearly have the umpire out. All he's doing is getting the ball and just shifting it on. As you say, there's no pace to it. There's no real incision. there's no really added incentive to it at all. I find where it does work is when you have a keeper, and Beggan, to be fair to him, is generally very, very cool and very calm on the ball and very adept at running with the ball. But when you have a guy who is able to take the ball at pace and bring it that 20 or 30 metres, or indeed be able to pick a pass, over maybe a kind of a blanket defence, that's where I think it really, really comes into play. It also comes into play, obviously, when you want to get out of trouble in your own defence and you have a person who has the ability just to move and shift the ball. I think some teams are getting a little bit caught. They're getting caught between two stools, as I said, of just playing it and just having a guy there all the time out. If I was the opposition to that and I identified a team that we were coming up against that was doing that with a goalkeeper, I would definitely be setting some traps for the goalkeeper. Allow the goalkeeper the ball and actually let him come in and let him maybe come down the centre of the pitch a bit more, and then look to trap him, look to dispossess him, and then look to obviously try and get the ball back into the back of the net as they all chase back. I think we've seen it, and we're going to see it again more and more, because at the end of the day, a lot of goalkeepers, although they're improving, a lot of keepers aren't all that comfortable with having the ball in the hand, especially when you've a couple of players coming running at them and trying to dispossess them. So I think there is it's a 50-50 thing at the moment. I think the more important thing really for goalkeepers, of course, is the restarts, and it's always been the restarts. The power of that and the ability to get your own kickouts away is still a massive thing. And when we go back to Dublin, the Cluxton factor and everything else of that, and the restarts and the speed of restarts is still something that I think that they're slightly missing. They're improving on it, but it is still a big factor for
them. Kerry are very good. Owen is bearing the lead here. Kerry are very, very good at the moment. Looking efficient, have found a defensive style, have solved a lot of the problems. Are we missing this?
No, I don't think so. I think they're really good, Ger. I tell you what they've brought. They've brought an unbelievable aggression now in their defence. We spoke about it last week about this idea of running to the ball. I thought last year they were in this weird zonal thing where they had players back, and I see teams doing it now, and it really, irks me. Fellas are back there. There's bodies there, but actually no one is actually picking up men. You see the Tyrone goal, McBurty's goal against Tyrone. If you count the amount of Tyrone players that were in vicinity of around McBurty when he made that run, I think there was 7 or 8 Tyrone guys, and there was 2 or 3 Donegal guys. I think there actually could have been 8 Tyrone guys. 8 defenders should never be done by 3 forwards. That should never happen. Someone's not doing their job there. And what's happening is, when you're in that situation, the responsibility is passed from one to another without even maybe communication. And of course, all it needs is a slight breakdown and a fella with a bit of skill, and in he goes. And that was happening last year with Kerry. There was fellas passing guys on. The other guy wasn't aware that he actually was the recipient of the player. Next thing, he was watching the ball. 2 guys in behind, bang, goal or score. Whereas this year they are really set. They're man to man. They're very aggressive. They have the +1. They have someone else back in there. Morley, I think, has been a bit of a revelation where he's playing. They have an awful lot of pace coming from the half-back line. I'm not a massive fan of O'Bugler from a defensive point of view. If you look at him against Dublin, Bugler gave him all sorts of problems. But from an attacking point of view, he is unbelievably quick. And when you think of White and you think of all the rest of the guys that are still due to come back into that team, they're firm favourites for me at the moment. Firm favourites, and we could be looking at a situation like we had in Dublin for the last 10 years. Because these guys are young, they're hungry, and when you want to go back to narratives, look at the narrative of that team. They're sitting there and they're saying, right, it's now our time. It's our time to stamp. We've had enough of this, the blue wave, the drive for 5, all this kind of crack, whatever it is, blah, 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 6, 7, many All-Irelands. They're now saying, right, it's time now for us to write history. And I tell you wouldn't bet against them.
It's hard to disagree with that, and I think they're narrowing in as Ireland favourites over the last couple of weeks as well. I'm not sure if there is a situation that yourself, Anthony, from experience, where the longer a season goes on, the more that expectation just develops inside in the mentality, and what a manager can do to try and, I guess, remedy that a little bit is chopping and changing with the squad a little bit more than you actually need to from week to week, just to keep things fresh in the squad, because there is no getting away from the fact now that they are firm favourites, and it's getting firmer, to be honest, like, because you've got like Dublin, I think, were second favourites before the weekend, so I presume that they've moved out a little bit again, so that only just strengthens Kerry's cause again. So how do you, I guess, actively fight against the mental challenges that going for their first All-Ireland for many of them is going to pose?
Well, you're the Kerry man, Owen. So, like, I don't think expectation is never been an issue with Kerry people. Like, there's an expectation whether you had great teams or pretty mediocre teams. So I think when you go into and you put on that Kerry jersey, whether you're playing under 12, 14, or all the way up through the senior, there is an expectation that you are going to wear it and you are going to beat the opposition, no matter who they are. So I don't think they're going to suffer from, to be like startled bunnies. They're going to realise that actually now is their time. I think they will take that mantle on. And I think they will take it on with gusto. I think they will look at every single team that they come up against, and I think they will feel that they're going to be ruthless. I can see that in them. There is a bit of a ruthless streak in them. As I said, they can mix it either way with you. And when they have the opportunities to even go for points, they're saying, right, let's go for goals here. They are literally bringing every opportunity to its last phase. And that is a sign of a team that is massively hungry and that is playing with their head up and is playing with massive confidence and is playing with ruthlessness. And, I don't think O'Connor will have a problem, honestly, with from a psychological point of view. Yeah, if they get a couple of injuries, if Clifford got injured or O'Shea got injured, but I think honestly that the strength and depth is so strong now that they're able to bring guys in and just replace fellas. So, I know we're building them up here, but I really honestly, I can't see many other people having the firepower that they have. The question mark I always had was the defence. That was my question mark. I thought they could score plenty up front, but it was leaking at the other end, and I think they've solved that, are on the way to solving it in a big way.
Kerry are 11-8, Dublin 3-1, still second favourites.
Second, right?
Yeah, by a mile as well. Mayo are 6-1, Tyrone are 9-1, Donegal 14.
I'm being genuine when I say this. Mayo 6-1 is value, right? Like, I mean, you have to say that it's hard to make a case that they're at bigger price than Dublin at the moment, Anthony.
I may have said that's serious. I'd agree. That's serious value. Like, I don't want to harp on about this, but again, you look at Mayo, right? You look at what they did over the weekend, and you look, like, people kind of go, oh, how do they keep coming back? Well, why wouldn't they keep coming back? They want that ultimate prize. The question for Mayo would be, when they eventually get their hands on that prize, what they will do the following year or the year after that, because that their narrative is driving and continuously getting up off the floor and going for that. So those guys don't know when they're beaten. It is literally drilled into their heads. It's in every being that they are, that they feel that they need to get to the promised land. So every single time they do a training session, every single time they do a video session, an analysis session, every time they play a game, they're thinking, we need to get to that promised land. They're constantly motivated to push towards that. Now, I'm not saying other teams aren't, but you'll find if players were really, really honest, other teams would be, well, we're in a rebuild phase, we're in this, we're in that. Whereas Mayo constantly, every single time they start out, that's where they want to go. And like, you look at them, you look at what they're doing, you look at their strength and depth. Like, they're bringing guys off the bench. I think they brought, whatever it was, Durkin, O'Hora, Kevin McLaughlin, and Aidan O'Shea, and like that's four serious. That's firepower coming in off the sideline, and that's guys who can change a game, and who can do things for you, and the strength and depth once again. These guys have to accept this role. Like, Aidan O'Shea is a big character in that Mayo dressing room, and he has to accept the role that he's coming on. He has to accept the role that he's coming on and going to change things. And again, that's something that Horan has done very, very well. he's managed to operate that whole idea of that we have fellas coming in who are going to enhance the team. We're going to finish with a stronger team than we started. That whole idea. But again, that's all about him building kind of messages around the team. And look, they're going to be thereabouts. They're not going to go away. Not a chance.
One last question for you. The situation in Meath is getting a bit desperate at this point. It's tricky that the remaining fixtures they have. There's some winnable games. They're playing the best team in the division still to go. So there's a possibility that they're staring down the barrel of the Tailteann Cup in advance of the Leinster Championship.
Yeah, it's not good, Ger. It's not good. We've been. Thanks for bringing this on me on a Monday morning as we sign off. No, I'm not. Look, I think I wasn't at the game. Okay, so I can't really talk about too much about the game against Offaly on Saturday. They got out of jail with a last-minute goal, but I looked at some of the stats on it. Again, their efficiency rate in front of goal is really low. I think it was 30% of shots from play were scores. And then 37 or 38% overall. That's bad, and it's been at that level. I think they've only scored 45 points. I think they're one of the lowest scoring teams across the 4 divisions. So they have problems. They have a lot of injuries. They got Ronan Jones back. They were essentially without their 2 starting midfielders, which was Jones and Menton. They got Jones back. He's helped things. Menton will come back. But again, there's time. It is a massive time for a few of those new guys who've been in the last number of years. They need to step up and they need to start scoring. They're probably trying now in the last few games, and I would say over the next few games, to bring a bit more of that youth in that was kind of in the minors and the under-20 squads over the last couple of years. So you will start to see them being kind of filtered in. But there's no doubt about it. Andy, you guys know, you covered it when the county board had a bit of an upheaval against them, and they had to go back to the clubs. I've spoken about this before. That's never an easy situation then for a management team to have that sitting over them, whether you're winning or losing. And of course, what only happens is the pressure gets applied even more when you start to lose a few games or draw a few games, or you're in the situation that you're in. There's only one thing that can happen there. The players have to dig in, the management team have to dig in, and the county has to dig in, and they have to get behind Andy, and they have to get behind this squad, and they have to try and push, because on their day they're a very, very good team. They're very fast, they're very quick. They can open you up. But I noticed something against Offaly, again, passive defending, guys in zones, not really. If you look at the McNamee goal, he gives the pass, he runs past 3 Meath players, runs through them to get on the end of it. As soon as he gives that pass, he should be bang. He should be hit for when he wants to go for the return. He should not be allowed to go anywhere near it in towards the goal. And of course, what happens is he gives the pass, ends up getting it back, sticks it in the back of the net at a vital time in the game. Now they kept going and they peppered the goal, and they were probably unfortunate that it ended up as a last minute, but they got their just rewards. But I think it is pressure for him, Ger, and I think there's a couple of games. Obviously, they have to play Cork, which is going to be a big one. But I wouldn't be surprised if they took a bigger scalp. I really wouldn't. I wouldn't be surprised if they took a bigger scalp, in the run in. But they need a big scalp to get confidence within the squad. Yeah,
well, nothing like a last minute goal to get out of jail to actually make training a bit happier this week. So we'll see. Anthony, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
No bother, lads. Talk to you.
Meath have Derry, Clare and Cork left in their 3 games, and there's a bit of jeopardy around those. So, look, a league-based championship
would have been good,
in making everybody interested in the last. These are dead rubbers. No, we're not supposed to have any interest left in these games now because they're dead rubbers. Yeah. Means nothing.
There's an alternate reality where we're having a great time right now.
I'm having a good time. There's definitely
of course. How could you not be?
There's definitely an alternate reality. Where maybe the world is not going to hell. 9:41 this morning. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Right, we want to say congratulations to Dermot Ronayne, winner of our Gillette Labs shaving pack this morning. He was canvassing for the Cork hurlers to make the green. We will go in depth on the week's hurling more tomorrow and the rest of the week as well, when the hurling rankings will have to be absolutely obliterated from where they were by Will later on this week. Join us tomorrow morning. We'll be live from 7:30 to 10 o'clock across all of OTB's social channels. If you missed anything in the show, subscribe to our podcast feed, search OTB AM, and you'll be able to listen back. Right now, here's James Downey and Malcolm O'Kelly in conversation with Will Callahan.
Very welcome back to Off the Ball on this Sunday. It's been a pretty comprehensive win for Ireland. 9 tries scored in all as they beat Italy by 57 points to 6 to keep Andy Farrell's side's chances of winning the Six Nations alive going into the last 2 weekends. They'll go to Twickenham in a couple of weeks' time to try and secure themselves a chance of a triple crown as well, with Scotland to come in the last game. France, of course, winning this weekend against Scotland at Murrayfield keeps them on top of the table. And England have still got a slim chance of winning the championship themselves after they beat Wales. Now, England still have got Ireland at home and France away, a difficult finish to the championship, but Ireland are still in contention to lift the trophy at the end. Malcolm O'Kelly's here with me. We'll be talking to James Downey from the Aviva Stadium, who was covering the game for us on Off the Ball in just a few moments. But you know, Mal, was pretty comfortable. 57 points scored against an Italian team who played a lot of the game 2 men short, and particularly that Favia red card in the first half had a big impact on the game, because once he went off, the scrum started to go to bits. They were uncontested, and Italy were a man short all the time in their forwards, which allowed Ireland to dominate things up front for most of the game.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, that's just the way things happen, and it's tragic for the Italians. To go a man down, but then to end up going another man down, and they defended stoutly. To be fair to them, they continued with their press and they pushed. But I think more than anything, when they actually got hold of the ball themselves, they weren't able to hold on to it. The Irish defence was superb, and they forced them either to kick it or to turn over. And it was just an inevitability. It was just Ireland's wave after wave after wave. And then to unleash the bench, then on top of that, and the tries just steadily came and came. You know, the Irish play, it's hard to actually say how good it was. It was loose. There was a lot of balls down.
In the first half, really, that frustrated you because Ireland were a man up. They'd already got a couple of tries on the board. You're thinking, take control, take your time about this. And they were maybe forcing the offloads a little bit.
Absolutely. Now, you know, that's the way the Irish are starting to play. And the Italians were flying up, and there was all or nothing for them. And generally, they actually were containing us to a degree. But once we kind of put them through the phases, because we were able to put a lot of good play together that got soft shoulders, we found some good gain lines, and then we found our overlaps, and then we made use of the fact that they were down men, and then we scored tries. I'm sure Andy Farrell will be with them, will talk to them about, you know, decision making. When do you ship it? When do you not ship it? When do you make these offloads and when not? Because in 2 weeks' time in Twickenham, it's going to be 1 or 2 offloads that make or break the match. It's going to be a tight game. It's how Ireland use the ball that they have. They won't have the ball as much as they had against Italy. So England are very tough up front, very tough nut to crack. Okay, they weren't as potent as they probably will be in a year or 18 months. But, every game, a couple of changes that might change things for them. So they have the basis of a very strong side. They have very strong individuals. It's just getting that relationship a little bit better, I think.
When it comes to that looseness, you can probably give me a player's perspective on this. Does this happen somewhat when it's a game like Italy where you're expected to win and the game feels fairly open already, that some of the risks that were taken, particularly late in that first half, wouldn't have happened at the Stade de France? That ball would have been taken into contact and they would have slowed things down.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because it's the player's choice to make the offload. I think when you've got that, you're a man up. You can see the space outside. Like you can see, it's only a pass away. But that pass is a tricky pass. That pass is a lobbed pass. The space is it's not really there. They're closing it. And I think Ireland fell into that kind of trap of, yes, there's space there, but we're not actually manufacturing any space. We're just shipping it in across the pitch. And that happened numerous times, like you think you can get around them, but you actually can't, even though they're only a man down or 2 men down. We still can't just get around them by just trying to run around them. That's under 12 stuff. They've got to be more intelligent and hold the defenders and then try and get around. And the space will be there if you force they forced the defenders to actually defend and hold. And they did that though as well. Not to say that they didn't do that, but they just didn't do it every time. You know, they saw the space and went to it when it really wasn't there.
James Downey's with us as well at the Aviva Stadium. He's been watching the game for us here on Off the Ball. And James, just talking about how sometimes the game was a little bit too loose from an Irish perspective when they probably should have taken control. But your feeling in a general sense coming out of the back of that game, 9 tries, 57 points put on the board, is it a satisfactory day's work?
Yeah, I guess you have to say it is. It's job done, and it's on to the bigger one now in 2 weeks' time. I think even against 15 men, we were going to expect to get a bonus point try, and people were talking with the 50 regardless. So I feel that it is job done. I was listening to Mal talking there about earning that kind of right to go wide, and I completely agree with him. Sometimes we just tried to get the ball into that space too early, too quickly, instead of just kind of sucking in 1 or 2 defenders and then actually getting and exposing the extra numbers, because ultimately they had 5. Like when they look at the video and off scrums, they only had 5 in that back line because you had to have the 8 men in the forwards, so they were actually down 2 in their backs. So if you're going to be down against England or Scotland against 5 men in the back line, you're going to have to execute. You're only going to get a couple of chances. So the execution levels, Andy Farrell mightn't be too happy with it. Also kind of handling errors, the 12 handling errors, which is high enough from an Irish perspective, and it's certainly something that Ireland are going to want to sort out before 2 weeks' time. Yeah, the efficiency in the attack was maybe a bit better, James, in the second half with the way that the tries were taken. And something we were quite impressed with here in studio watching on the TV is that closing stage of the game, Ryan Baird gets up, blocks down that box kick and gets the reward of a try for himself. Mac Hansen towards the end of the game is making sure the ball doesn't go dead and putting in every effort to try and recycle it as well. It takes a little bit of hunger when you're already 40 points up to make decisions like that. Yeah, I think it does, and someone like a Ryan Baird been threatening to do something all day, and we did see him getting his gallop and open up and following up on a great pickup as well under pressure, and he didn't stop stride to pick it up. But yeah, I think someone like a Mac Hansen as well, these are the players that in the last 20 minutes you want them to have that hunger. That's exactly what you want to see. You want them to try and get their hands on the ball. These are the exciting players that have been brought in for a reason, and the reason is that they can score tries, so you'd expect them to have that hunger. And yeah, last couple of minutes, but they all want to get their hands in that ball. And I thought Mike Lowry as well, a bit of credit to Mike Lowry, who could easily have gone over for his own hat-trick and unselfishly threw it to James Lowe to score in the corner. So yeah, look, these guys, they're potent finishers, a lot of them, and you just want to get their hands on the ball. Even Johnny Sexton, when he came on, showed a little bit of oomph to go through a break and set up one of the tries. So you want that hunger, especially from the bench. You want the bench to make an impact. I know Mal was very impressed by Lowry, so I'll ask you about what you made of his performance today. Like, if you're a fullback, ideally you want to come up against a team who were stretched. He got 2 tries himself, as you mentioned. He laid on the try for James Lowe when he possibly could have went for the line himself. But I thought the Ulsterman acquitted himself very well today. Yeah, I'd agree with you exactly. I think he wasn't tested too much at the back, but Italy didn't have the numbers and maybe had to change their game plan slightly. So I was pretty impressed with how he went about his business, and that was a perfect game for him, especially when they drop down numbers. There's going to be a lot of space. There's going to be a lot of heavy, tired forwards, and that's exactly what he's done for Ulster, and he's picked out that. But he took his lines well for his tries, and just that. The pass at the end, the 2-on-1 when he could have gone himself, it just showed his unselfishness and showed what a team player he is. Well, I'll give you first word. I know it makes way more sense to go to the centre on the argument about the Ireland midfield, but we'll let James listen in and come to you then. Irish midfield for Twickenham obviously depends somewhat on Robbie Henshaw. Went off in a little bit of pain there in the second half, and we had the Terry Butcher bandage on Gary Ringrose for a while in the second half. But assuming that Bundy Aki, Robbie Henshaw, Gary Ringrose are all fit for Twickenham in a couple of weeks, who do you pick?
Well, I think at the moment Robbie Henshaw is probably not quite game ready for that big game, so I would definitely go with Bundy and Kerry.
They're a good combination in big games. We know that already. I think Bundy Aki probably benefited from the experience of being with the Lions last summer too. He also, depending on what happens at Manitoulagi, gives you that extra bit of beef in midfield as well, doesn't he?
I think currently the way the English midfield is set up, like having Bundy there, or even Robbie, but let's assume Bundy is there, like he is such a threat going forward. That midfield with Marcus Smith, Slade and Elliot Daly are not physically the most, they're not the most physical guys. They're not going to knock Bundy down. They're going to have to respect them, and then there'll be opportunities to get around them then, because they'll have to sit down on them. On the other hand, then when the English are attacking, there's going to be no way you're going to get through Bundy without feeling it. For me, that's where our advantage is. I'm sure James has spotted it as well. For me, Slade and Daly, they just did not have enough impact in the game, and I think that's where we're going to find some change.
James, I find as well when it comes to Bundy Aki, for any Connacht supporter who's been watching him in recent years, they know the ability that he has with the ball. He's been able to express himself a little bit more under Andy Farrell's system as well, which I think has actually made Bundy Aki a better international player too.
Yeah, I think so. I think, beforehand now, if you'd asked me a couple of months ago who I would kind of selected, I'd always kind of go, well, Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose, who I nailed on, and it would be very hard for Bundy to do something to change our mind, because I think that Robbie is one of those players who you can drop in even if he's missed a while and he can produce. But I do think that under this current regime that Bundy's stepped up a level, and maybe your point about being on the lines, he's got a dose of confidence from that. But if we're looking at the English game in 2 weeks, I think he's certainly the man you want to play in there, regardless of if Tuolangi's there or not, especially with a Marcus Smith and a Henry Slade playing in 10 and 12. They're quite light, and you'd be using that big fella running down his channel, and Marcus Smith could be put off his game quite easily. So I think Bundy Aki has brought an awful lot more to the table than I initially imagined, but he'd be the certainly starter I'd go for in 2 weeks' time.
Well, James, maybe the decision's made a bit easier if Robbie Henshaw is injured. It's been very rare over the last 2 years or so that actually all three of them are fit at the one time and one has to be left out. If you're leaving out Gary Ringrose, or if you're leaving out Robbie Henshaw, who do you leave out for Twickenham then?
I don't know. I'd leave out Robbie. I'd leave out Robbie at the moment, because you just have to have. I just think Gary offers so much defensively. He's just not clicked, I don't think, going forward. But defensively, we notice him when he's not there, and there's massive holes when he's not there, because he's that defensive linchpin who talks and controls the forwards and controls the line and gives that confidence to his blindside winger, or both wingers even. And I think that Robbie hasn't played there for quite a while, and I know Bundy and Robbie could play together, but ultimately I'd like to see Bundy and Gary, everyone being fit.
James, when it comes to the back three then for London in a couple of weeks, we kind of assume Hugo Keenan comes in, despite how well Michael Lowry has played today. He comes back in at 15. Does Mac Hansen keep his place in the team? We decide whether that's at 11 or 14. Has James Lowe done enough with his couple of tries today to force the agenda to maybe get picked? Or are you picking Andrew Conway? What composition are you expecting for a back three here?
Oh, it's going to be a tough one, I think. I'd certainly go with Hugo Keenan coming back in a full-back, just over in Twickenham, in that cauldron. I think solidity personified at the back there. He hasn't put a foot wrong. He's been superb for Ireland over the past 24 months. So Hugo Keenan's kind of nailed down at 15. And then it's the question that you just said. I suppose, I'd like to see Mac Hansen stay on. I think he hasn't put a foot wrong in everything he's done. I know James Lowe had a decent cameo today. He knows where the line is. He knows how to score. He does offer something different, but I think just over in Twickenham I would revert back to Andy Conway again, another person who hasn't put a foot wrong, who just, if we do have to kick a little bit, who will chase everything all day. I just think that it would be Andy Conway, Mac Hansen and Hugo Keenan back three in Twickenham.
I can understand the line thinking, Mal, that you bring in Conway, he's so solid, he's been a great try getter for Ireland in recent seasons too, that he probably deserves to start. Maybe Lowe's there as an option from the bench.
Yeah, I think it's a really good decision problem for Andy Farrell. I'm a big James Lowe fan, big left boot. could be important. We saw it today. He, you know, so many of the good work of Ireland today went down through his channel. I think he's a game changer. As good as Conway is, I would have probably Conway and Hansen selection issue. That's where I would go, one or the other there.
Go on, which way are you going?
You know, just from what Andy Farrell has been like, I think he might go Hansen low. And then I agree. I think definitely Hugo Keenan back at 15. He hasn't put a foot wrong. And as good as Mike Lowry was today, we didn't really get to see him being really challenged up in the air. And we've seen Hugo Keenan, how good he is and authoritative he is in the air. So he'll get my vote.
I think we go Jameson, Gibson Park, Sexton as the picks at 9 and 10 for Twickenham. You were mentioning how Sexton came in and actually had quite a good impact on the game today. Considering he's come back from a hamstring injury, he's coming in from probably nursing that over the last 10 days or so. He was hungry to get out there and actually make a difference when he came on.
Yeah, I think he still has more authority there than Carberry. Carberry he's shown us what a beautiful footballer he is, what a great reader of the game he is, that he can allow the team to flow. But for me, Sexton, just the whole team revolves around him. He is the absolute heartbeat of that team, and when he's there, everything is in sync. And they looked absolutely supreme at the end. Again, the opposition with the men down, it's hard to get a good caller on it, but for me they just looked so good, and Casey in there now coming in, he looked really good, seamless as a handover, and he should be looked at as well.
James, when it comes to the Sexton versus Carberry debate, I think we almost assume that it's going to be Sexton who starts against England. But it's actually kind of worked out reasonably well with Carberry with the Sexton injury on the week of the France game, because we got to see for the very first time in the Six Nations a starting scenario for Joey Carberry against a strong team. It was more by accident than design with the injury, but we got to see a lot of Joey Carberry in Paris. We again got to see an hour of Joey Carberry today. Sexton gets to come on for 20 minutes. And realistically, those roles are going to be flipped when it comes to the England game. By the end of this Six Nations, Joey Carberry will have got some very significant game time in a season where he's been nursing injury for Munster really right up until Christmas.
Yeah, I think, and it's exactly that, significant game time, and it's against quality opposition rather than here's your token start against Italy and then we can revert the type again, and Joey doesn't get that game time. So yeah, I think that has been an advantage that Johnny was out, and I think he did extremely well 2 weeks ago. So look, he hasn't started in 2 years. He's been so unfortunate. It's been well publicised, all his injuries. So I think for Joey, for Ireland, for Johnny as well, to have someone pushing him and breathing down his neck, that can only be good for Irish rugby, and hopefully he can stay fit. But yeah, I expect Johnny Sexton to come straight back in, because again, I agree completely with what Mal said. He's the heartbeat of this Irish side.
James, looking at the forwards then, what do you make of Dan Sheehan getting his chance to start today?
I thought Dan was good today. I thought he offered himself a lot. He never stops working. I think you can see he nearly wants to he wants something to happen. He wants to create something. He wants a big break. He wants to get his name in the lights, and I think he might have been a little bit frustrated today. He was just a couple of times the Italian defence held on to his shorts a couple of times when he could have made a break. A nice little 2-on-1 for Joey Carberry's try to start. But yeah, I don't think he's done enough at the moment to surpass Ronan Kelleher. But I think he's certainly breathing in down his throat, and he can certainly kick on the next couple of weeks.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar